Hey guys, tonight we're going to do something a little different. You're going to be born into a medieval royal family. Congrats. You get the gowns, the castles, the titles, and a DNA cocktail so concentrated it might actually hum. You're about to discover what it means to be one of the most inbred women in medieval history. Spoiler, you probably won't survive this. But it'll be a journey, and one that ends with a fanfare of silk, incense, and long, drawn-out genetic collapse. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments, what city are you watching from, and what time is it there right now? I love knowing where in the world you're drifting off with me. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're born into a stone fortress, somewhere in the mist-draped folds of medieval Europe. The year, roughly 1125. The air smells of wax, wood smoke, and wet wool. Your crib is less a crib and more a carved oak box lined with linen and crushed rosemary. Your nursemaid whispers prayers over you, because she knows, everyone knows, that noble births come with their own set of ghosts. Especially in families where cousin marries cousin, generation after generation, because love is irrelevant and land is everything. Your mother is your father's second cousin, or first cousin once removed, or maybe both. It gets hard to tell after a few marriages. Her face looks a bit like his, which is either sweet or deeply troubling depending on how much you know about chromosomes. She's elegant, quiet, with blue veins threading through pale skin like a medieval map. You don't cry much. That's either because you're a perfect child, or because your nervous system hasn't fully signed on for the job. Time will tell. The monks record your birth with trembling quills in Latin, noting your titles before your name. They list your father's lineage down through 3 generations, and then your mother's, noticeably shorter and eerily similar. There's something tragic about how closely those 2 branches bend toward each other. If you were a tree, you'd be trying to pollinate yourself. By the time you can walk, people already whisper. You have your grandmother's eyes and your great-grandfather's jaw. That's not a compliment. Your teeth arrive late and never quite know what angle to grow in. A court physician with a robe that smells of herbs and goat breath fingers your gums and sighs. The blood is noble, he says quietly, but it's dense. He doesn't say inbred. That word doesn't exist yet, but he's seen it before, and he'll see it again. Because here's the thing, power isn't just inherited in the Middle Ages, it's hoarded. Families don't expand outward, they double back on themselves like ivy in a closed room. A duke marries his niece. A queen weds her cousin. An emperor's daughter is promised to her uncle before she can even read. This isn't a bug in the system, it is the system. Inheritance means control, and marrying strangers risks giving that control away. So from your earliest days, your future is decided by people who never met a gene they didn't want to loop. You're part of a grand, gruesome tradition of keeping it in the family. And because you're female, your body is a bargaining chip first, a breeding vessel second, and a person maybe third. If you're lucky, you learn to walk on flagstone floors slick with damp. You learn to sit still during endless dinners where peacocks are served with their feathers, reattached, and everyone watches your posture. Your governess, a woman who once nursed a count's illegitimate daughter, teaches you to curtsy and to hide the tremor in your right hand when it acts up. She calls it the saint's twitch. But really, it's the family tremor. Your grandfather had it. So did his sister. And if the whispers are true, so did their shared grandmother. You're not alone in this. The medieval world is peppered with women like you, high-born, high stakes, and genetically and over their heads. You'll meet them, eventually. But for now, you exist in a fog of incense, candlelight, and faintly metallic aftertaste from all the herbal tonics you're forced to drink. One tastes like mint and fear, another like burnt thyme and something too bitter to name. On your 5th birthday, a man with a heavy cloak and a gold ring arrives. He kneels before you, not out of affection, but assessment. You're being considered. Your jawline is examined. Your hands are turned over, palms studied like maps to some royal treasure. He asks your nurse, "Does she bleed yet?" The nurse blushes. You don't understand the question, but you will. Medieval girls like you aren't measured by milestones. You're measured by marriability, and marriability is measured by bloodlines. Yours is tangled, precious, and perilous. Your great-great-grandfather married his cousin, then married her niece. Your father's mother was also your mother's aunt. It's hard to diagram. It's harder to explain. But the result is this. Your immune system is bad at its job, your facial structure is a bit off, and you sometimes sleepwalk into the courtyard and scream in Latin. One priest says you're blessed, another says you're cursed, the third just drinks more wine. Let's pause for a moment and bring in our first historical fact. Eleanor of Aquitaine, one of the most powerful women of the 12th century, was herself a product of many tangled bloodlines. By the time she married Henry II of England, their shared ancestry was so convoluted that papal permission was required to make it official. Their union would produce 10 children, some brilliant, some tragic, all soaked in the same tight DNA. Here's a weirder one. In some royal courts, babies were taste tested. Not in the cannibal way, calm down, but through their wet nurses. Royal families would taste the nurse's milk to see if it was pure. Sometimes it was mixed with wine or garlic first, depending on which doctor you asked. Science wasn't exactly thriving yet, and while we're on science, here's your open scholarly debate. Did medieval royals know they were genetically bottlenecking themselves? Some historians argue they did, and considered it a necessary evil. Others suggest the concept of genetic health didn't really exist, and what they saw as noble traits were actually early symptoms of hereditary disease. Either way, the results weren't great. So here you are, 5 years old, highborn, high risk, and already navigating the choppy waters of inheritance, illness, and identity. Your future is stitched into your blood, and your blood, unfortunately, is about as diverse as a fruitcake made from one raisin and 100 years of pressure. You're about 10 when they first bring you the tapestries. Not for decoration, though they are gorgeous in that vaguely menacing medieval way, but for education. Each one tells a story, and every story is family. You're expected to study your ancestors like a monk studies scripture. The tapestries stretch down the long, echoing hall that smells of damp stone and beeswax, each stitch woven by some half-blind servant who probably didn't live long enough to see the final knot tied. The first face you recognise is Eleanor of Aquitaine. She looks powerful and terrifying. Your tutor says she was clever, beautiful, and dangerously independent. Not that you're encouraged to be any of those things. Eleanor rode in armour, led armies, and divorced a king. She was also your great-great-great something, depending on which thread of the bloodline you trace, and naturally she was inbred. It's almost ceremonial at this point. Her parents were related, her children married their cousins, and her grandchildren's family trees look more like family wreaths. You trace your finger along the thread that forms her eyes. They stare out with a mix of challenge and resignation. You wonder if she knew what was in her blood. Probably not in the way we do now, but she had to feel it. The deaths, the madness, the way the bodies of your ancestors seem to wear out faster than they should. That's not a coincidence. It's a rhythm, and you're dancing to it. Now you're learning courtly manners, as all girls of your rank must. You practice how to greet a king, how to bow without falling, and how to keep your expression still when you're offered in marriage like a chess piece. You learn Latin prayers and how to pretend you're not terrified when your monthly bleeding doesn't arrive on time, or when it won't stop. Your body's becoming something alien. It curves where it shouldn't, aches without reason, and occasionally blanks out like a flickering candle. But you smile, because your future depends on appearing healthy, desirable, and genetically solid. You're none of those things, but your hair's shiny and that helps. One afternoon, you're brought into a chilly solar where 3 men in robes wait for you. One has the dead eyes of a bishop, one wears a signet ring so heavy it practically glows, and the third is a physician. Not the nice kind with herbs and honeyed tea, the kind with leeches. They don't speak to you at first. They talk about you, the way a butcher might talk about a pig's haunches. She has the Aquitaine jaw, one says. A good sign. But the walk? The other counters. A limp, slight, but there. The physician leans in. How many fingers do you see? 4, you answer. There are 5. You've learned that the wrong answer is sometimes the right one. They send word back to your father. The girl is viable. For what, they don't say. But you know. Your marriage will be arranged soon, and it won't be romantic. It'll be strategic, just like Eleanor's. She married King Louis VII of France first, then Henry II of England. In between, she got into trouble with a crusade, flirted with rebellion, and possibly seduced her own uncle. That last part is debated, but given the bloodlines involved, seducing an uncle was barely scandalous. In your family, it's practically a christening. Let's be real for a moment. At this point, you've probably got 4 grandparents and only 6 great-grandparents if you're lucky. Genetically speaking, you're circling the drain. You've heard whispers from servants, words like fits, melancholy and unnatural appetites. You're not entirely sure which ones refer to you, probably all of them. Here's your historical fact of the night. Eleanor of Aquitaine was the grandmother of both Blanche of Castile and Richard the Lionheart, which means 2 of the most influential figures in medieval Europe owed their existence to her tangled genetics. Richard, by the way, may have been sterile, there's still debate, and Blanche's family line led straight to Louis IX, another sickly child who grew into a saint. Or at least, that's what the church says. And now for something weirder. During Eleanor's time, people believed that a child's personality could be shaped by what the mother saw during pregnancy. If she looked at something ugly, say a deformed animal, her child might come out with a hunchback or a clubfoot. Some royal women were forbidden from seeing peasants, deformities, or even certain animals while pregnant. You, of course, will be surrounded by brocade and prayer books, but that won't save your genes. As for our scholarly debate, Eleanor's marriage to Henry II was famously passionate, but also famously dysfunctional. Historians can't agree whether their eventual estrangement was due to political tension, mutual infidelity, or Eleanor simply getting tired of being treated like a womb with a crown. Some say she encouraged her sons to rebel against their father. Others say she merely survived a situation that would have crushed a weaker woman. Either way, you can bet it all came wrapped in the same genetic packaging: proud, brittle, and slightly cursed. You're about 13 now. Your chest tightens in the cold, your joints ache after riding, and sometimes you hear a low buzzing sound no one else seems to notice. You're told it's nerves. But it feels like something deeper, something coded into you, passed down like a spell. You pray harder at night, but even the saints seem wary of your bloodline. You dream about Eleanor sometimes, not the version in the tapestry, the real one, full of fire and rage and regret. She whispers to you in Latin, voice like crackling parchment. They'll never love you for who you are, only for who you resemble. And she's right. When your marriage finally comes, they'll call you beautiful because that's what they're supposed to say. But what they really mean is, she looks like her mother, or her aunt, or that one cousin who died young but had excellent ankles. They want a reminder of the past, not a future. You're living nostalgia, barely upgraded, an echo with a heartbeat. So you ride through Eleanor's lands past her ruined keeps and misty hills, and you wonder, will they tell stories about you? Will some wide-eyed girl, generations from now, trace your face on a faded tapestry and say, she was powerful? Or will you be forgotten? Just another noble girl with too much silk and not enough chromosomes. The sky turns bruised purple above you. The wind tastes like iron and rosemary. Somewhere, a hawk screams, and you smile just a little, thinking, maybe Eleanor's madness is already blooming in you. It's your wedding day, and you're 14 years old. You're standing in a hall heavy with incense and damp rushes, breathing through a nose that came straight from your great-grandmother's side. It's slightly crooked, slightly noble, and entirely inherited. Your groom is 17 and already thinning at the crown. You've met him once. He bowed. You curtsied. You both knew you were related, but not how closely. No one ever says it out loud, but it's in the room, like mildew. Your dress weighs more than a small goat, layered with velvet and pearls and stitched by women who whispered prayers into every seam. You're told this is a celebration, but no one smiles with their teeth. You notice your uncle crying in the third pew, not tears of joy. He remembers the last cousin who married this way. She died after her third miscarriage, barely 20. The baby had an extra thumb and no eyelids. They burned the body quietly. Your groom's hand trembles as he takes yours. His fingers are long, bony, almost spider-like. They look like they belong on a different body, maybe from a slightly better genetic batch. When he leans in to whisper something, maybe I'm sorry or let's get this over with, you smell wine, cloves, and the faint trace of old panic. You're now Isabella of Hainault, or close enough. In this timeline, you are her. She was a French queen consort in the 12th century, married to Philip II of France. But more importantly, she was also the product of generations of intermarriage among the Carolingians and Capetians. The wedding between Isabella and Philip was both a union and a doubling down on a family line so tight it could snap. Isabella's mother was Margaret of Flanders. Her father was Count Baldwin V of Hainault. These names may not mean much to you yet, but what matters is this. Nearly everyone on both sides of Isabella's family tree shared blood. Her marriage to Philip, that wasn't new territory. It was a continuation of an arrangement so ancient it had become ritual. The only difference is the generation number. Your dowry includes swaths of land no one's actually visited in decades, and a crown heavy enough to bruise your collarbone. But Philip doesn't care about the lands or the crown or you. He cares about the alliance and the bloodline. He's under pressure to produce a son and fast. France needs a direct heir, and if the baby comes out with an extra knuckle or the unmistakable Hainault jaw, well, they'll just commission a flattering portrait. Your body doesn't feel like yours anymore. After the wedding feast, which is mostly pike, goose and flat laughter, you're led to a narrow, candlelit chamber. Your mother told you what to expect, but she didn't tell you how much of your soul would float above the bed, watching from the rafters like a bored ghost. It's mechanical, awkward, over-fast. Your husband grunts once, sighs, and then rolls over without a word. You lie there, sticky with sweat and nobility, listening to a distant owl and wondering if it's normal to feel this hollow already. Welcome to royal womanhood. Within the year you're pregnant. Your stomach rounds like a melon under your gown, and people start speaking to you more gently, as if you've finally become useful. Your ladies-in-waiting coo and fuss. The midwife tests your urine with a ribbon dipped in wine. Girl, she says, or maybe twins. You nod. You're barely 15. Your back aches constantly. Your ankles swell to the size of apples, and your teeth ache in cold weather. One comes loose in your second trimester. The child is born in winter. A boy. There's a burst of joy in the court. Brief, flickering, and then the questions start. Is his jaw a little too set? Are his eyes crossed? Why doesn't he cry when pinched? The wet nurse says he's perfect. The court physician isn't so sure. Here's your historical fact. Isabella of Hainault gave birth to the future Louis VIII. He eventually became King of France, but he suffered from a variety of health issues, including what some scholars think were neurological conditions. He died in his 30s after a short and violent reign. Isabella herself died young, just 19, after complications from childbirth. And now for a fun fringe fact. Medieval courts believed birthmarks were the result of the mother's emotions during pregnancy. If she looked at a bear while frightened, the child might be born with a dark spot shaped like claws. So, women of noble blood were often kept indoors, away from peasants, animals, or dramatic plays during their pregnancies, as if that would fix the centuries of cousin-on-cousin marriages baked into their wombs. The debate here is about Isabella's health. Was her early death from sheer bad luck, or was it the result of chronic internal weakness caused by genetic compression? Some argue that her multiple failed pregnancies, 3 before Louis, point to a fragile constitution inherited from both sides. Others say the medieval birthing process itself was so brutal, even a healthy body didn't stand much of a chance. You don't die in childbirth, at least not yet, but you do fade. You get thinner, paler, and the light in your eyes gets replaced with something else, resignation. The court admires your poise. They call you saintly, but you're not a saint. You're just tired. Your body's doing math it was never meant to do, combining recessive genes with recessive genes, again and again, hoping for a miracle and getting migraines instead. Philip grows cold. He spends more time hunting and less time looking at you. Once, you ask him what he sees when he looks at your son. He says, a boy. That's enough. You want it to be enough. But you can't help noticing the way your son's hands twist inward, or how he shrieks when the wind changes. You worry, you pray. But prayer is just another way to pretend you have control over this. Eventually your name begins to fade from the songs. You're a mother now, not a queen. A vessel, not a voice. And when your heart starts to flutter like a trapped bird in your chest, no one notices. Not until it's too late. In your final days you lie in a dark chamber that smells of roses and sweat. Your son toddles nearby, humming tunelessly. You smile at him with the last strength you have. He smiles back, wide-eyed, unknowing, with the unmistakable look of someone who'll carry your blood and all its brittle beauty into the next disaster. You're dust now, more or less. Your bones rest beneath a stone slab carved with flattering lies and a crest that used to mean something. But the story doesn't stop, because blood remembers. And while you may have faded from court life, your son did not. He carries your face, your jaw, your sorrow, and he passes it all on, as expected. The line continues, like a cracked vase being handed down from child to child, each one adding a new dent. Now you are someone else. New name, new crown, same old blood. Welcome to the late 12th century, where your name is Joan, and your father is none other than Henry II of England, Eleanor of Aquitaine's second husband. That makes you the half-sister of Richard the Lionheart, and of John, who will one day lose the crown jewels in a river and get bullied into signing the Magna Carta. Charming family, really. You grow up in a castle that's always cold, no matter the season. The stone seems to cling to winter, the way your family clings to its own bloodline. Your nursemaid tells you stories of your grandmother's beauty and her cousin marriage, like it's the stuff of fairy tales. No one tells you how that beauty came with a price. Brittle bones, night sweats, sudden fevers. They just say, she had noble blood, and leave the rest for the midwives to clean up. Your brothers are constantly fighting, mostly over land, occasionally over you, because you're valuable. Not as Joan, the girl who loves hawks and hates embroidery, but as a bargaining chip, and soon enough, that bargain arrives. At age 12, you're married off to William II of Sicily. He's 20 years older, has a chin like a shovel, and a palace full of marble that smells like fish and dying flowers. Also, he's your cousin. Not first cousin, but close enough that if you both sneezed at the same time, it might trigger a family curse. Sicily is beautiful, you have to admit. Warm winds, citrus groves, and cathedrals taller than your nightmares. But your immune system, which has always been a little theatrical, doesn't enjoy the climate. You develop strange rashes, your joints swell, a fever rolls in one night, and you hallucinate your mother reciting prayers backwards. The court physicians call it heat madness. The truth is, your body was barely equipped for damp English fog, let alone Mediterranean sun and politics. The marriage is surprisingly bearable. William is distracted by his wars and his wine. He seems to like you, in the way someone likes a very expensive statue. You're expected to sit still, say little, and never die dramatically in public. You manage 2 out of 3, but then comes the plague. Not the plague. Too early for that. This one's local but vicious. Children drop like flies. Priests go hoarse from last rites. And when it hits your household, it takes servants, cooks, and eventually you. You survive, technically. But you're not the same. You lose half your hair. Your skin turns a waxy yellow that doesn't fade. And something in your mind disconnects, like a frayed thread in a once perfect tapestry. You smile when no one is speaking. You flinch at bells. People call you devout. They mean odd. Here's tonight's historical fact. Joan of England really was married off to William II of Sicily at age 12. Their union was childless, and she was widowed before she turned 30. After William's death, Joan was imprisoned by the new king of Sicily, her own cousin, who claimed she was too powerful to be left wandering around with her inheritance and her family connections. And now, a weird tidbit. In some courts, it was believed that rubbing a woman's belly with certain stones, like amber or agate, could stabilise the womb and prevent miscarriages. If you were considered too inbred, you might be smuggled a whole pouch of these crystals strapped to your stomach with linen strips. It didn't work, but it made everyone feel productive. As for debate, historians still argue whether Joan's lack of children was due to her own health or her husband's rumoured sterility. Some suspect genetic incompatibility, not just in the medieval, maybe God's mad at us way, but in the actual biological sense. Too many shared recessive traits causing developmental failure before a fetus could ever thrive. We'll never know. But the fact remains, the union of 2 royal bloodlines often produced more power struggles than healthy offspring. Eventually you escape Sicily, not with a dramatic ride on horseback or a stormy sea voyage, but with a stack of sealed letters and a suspiciously generous escort. You return to your brother Richard's side. He's off to the Crusades, all sword and glory, and you follow him like a loyal shadow. But you're tired. The heat makes your bones ache, and when you kneel to pray, your vision swims. They still dress you in gold, still call you princess, but you feel like a cracked chalice, precious, polished, and empty. You try to laugh, try to eat, try to believe that God has a plan that doesn't involve you dying in a sunlit corridor somewhere east of Jerusalem. But your body is a message written in the margins of 1,000 family contracts, and it's starting to fade. There's a scene near the end, You're on a ship rocking gently in the Mediterranean swells. You clutch a carved pendant of the Virgin Mary, its edges worn smooth by your fingers. A sailor tells you a story about a mermaid who drowned her entire family because she was born with gills and shame. You wonder if you're the mermaid, or the family. The air smells like salt and regret. You lie back on the deck, the stars scattered above like a spilled crown, and you exhale. Somewhere inside you, the threads of your tangled ancestry knot one final time. Maybe the next girl in line will be stronger, but you wouldn't bet on it. Your name this time is Margaret, and you arrive in the world with the weight of empires behind your squint. It's the late 15th century, and your cradle is surrounded not by singing peasant women or loving relatives, but by a tense circle of advisors double-checking your pedigree. Because you're not just any noble baby, you're a Habsburg, and that means something. Specifically, it means your parents share so much ancestry, they could have just sent one person to the wedding and saved everyone the trouble. Your mother is Mary of Burgundy, and your father is Maximilian I, future Holy Roman Emperor, war addict, and proud participant in a centuries-old family hobby, marrying his cousins. The Habsburgs have a motto that basically translates to, "Let others wage war, you, Austria, marry," which sounds poetic until you realise it translates into generations of genetic loops so tight they squeak. Now, by the time you're old enough to hold a fork, your jaw already clicks when you chew. Not dramatically, yet, but noticeably. The court physician tells your nurse it's nothing. A sign of nobility, he says, as if jaw problems were a tiara. You don't know it yet, but you're just the warm-up act for a long, increasingly disastrous line of Habsburg chins, tongues, teeth, and mental collapses. You're already part of the slow-motion train wreck. At 3, you're betrothed. Not engaged in the modern sense, no flower photos, no heartfelt speeches, just promised, wrapped up, and boxed like a valuable shipment of wine. Your future husband is the French Dauphin. Of course, he's also your cousin. It would be deeply scandalous if he weren't. You're sent to France to be raised at court, trained in the arts of grace, needlework, and how to be charmingly inoffensive, while slowly fusing the royal bloodlines of Europe into one incredibly high-risk lineage. You miss your father, sort of. But the French court is a glittering machine, all whispers and powdered fabrics, where everyone pretends to like you while tallying your dowry in their heads. You get sick often. Fevers that rise and fall like church bells. Joint pain that creeps into your knees when you kneel too long during Mass. They give you warm wine mixed with herbs, which taste like cinnamon and bad decisions. Then the Dauphin dies. Not of illness, not in battle, just dies. Because medieval teenagers were basically leaf piles with shoes. Flammable, fragile, and one bad wind away from tragedy. You're 9. You are legally a widow. At 9, they send you back home, not with sorrow or shame, but with paperwork. You're still valuable, still Margaret of Austria, still Habsburg stock. Your genes might be a gamble, but your blood is liquid real estate. You're raised in the Low Countries, where the wind always smells like rivers and fish. You grow up among books and diplomats. You speak 5 languages by the time you're 14. No one really knows what to do with you, so naturally they marry you off again. This time to John of Castile. Yes, of that Castile. Future Spain. You're 16. He's charming, poetic, and vaguely tubercular, which is pretty much the trifecta. You sail to Spain, get married under arches of roses, and promptly watch him die 6 months later. Tuberculosis wins. Again. And just like that, you're a widow. Again. 17 years old, twice married, twice bereaved, and still expected to smile like your teeth don't hurt when the weather changes. Here's your historical fact. Margaret of Austria really was betrothed to the French Dauphin, Charles, and raised in the French court. After his death, she married John, Prince of Asturias, the heir to the Spanish throne. He died young, leaving Margaret childless, and with a reputation for bad luck and excellent diplomacy. She eventually became regent of the Netherlands and raised her nieces and nephews, including Charles V, another Habsburg heir destined for medical horror. Fringe fact time, Margaret is rumoured to have kept a miniature coffin in her chambers for most of her adult life, a symbol of mourning for her lost husband. But it was also likely a subtle message. I've done my duty. Don't ask me to marry again unless you're also comfortable dying soon after. Now for the debate. Some historians argue that Margaret's repeated tragedies were less personal misfortune and more genetic inevitability. Her husband John, also of Habsburg descent, may have been already compromised by the same family entanglements. Others argue it was simple bad luck. But when your gene pool is a kiddie pool, odds are you'll drown in it eventually, one way or another. After John's death, Margaret returns to the Habsburg court with a new edge. You're no longer a girl to be traded, you're a woman who buries kings. People start listening when you speak. Maybe it's your education, maybe it's your grief, or maybe it's just that you've become too terrifying to ignore. You manage trade, negotiate peace, you even run the Netherlands as regent and avoid being assassinated, an achievement by any standard, especially for a woman who wears that much velvet. But there's always the ache, in your jaw, in your hands, behind your eyes when the headaches come. The physicians stop pretending it's nothing. They start using the word congestion, which is a polite way of saying your face might be trying to merge with itself. You eat soft foods, you avoid smiling too hard, your portraits are always in profile, you don't marry again, not for lack of offers, but you've learned what happens when your blood mixes with people who have your grandfather's eyebrows and your uncle's inability to digest goat's milk. You keep your womb to yourself, which in your family is practically revolutionary. You raise other people's children, carefully, with books, with logic, with a quiet prayer that maybe, just maybe, they'll get a better draw in the great genetic lottery. You teach them diplomacy, language, and the importance of marrying wisely. They don't listen. Not really, because they're Habsburgs too, and sooner or later, the family tradition will catch up with them. But for now, you walk the gardens slowly, wrapped in fur even in summer. You nod at diplomats. You smile with your eyes, because your jaw won't let you do much else. And when someone calls you Aunt Margaret, you don't correct them. You just grip the miniature coffin a little tighter in your hand and keep walking. You're not dead yet, just repurposed. This time you're Blanche, Queen of France, daughter of Castile, granddaughter of Henry II and Eleanor of Aquitaine, and a living reminder that Europe's ruling families really don't know how to branch out. You're born with enough noble blood to drown a cathedral, and everyone around you treats that like a blessing. It's not. It's a slow curse, one whispered in Latin and swaddled in silk. From the moment your cradle stops rocking, you're spoken of in terms of value. Not charm, not wit, not potential. Value. Like a gemstone, or a particularly fragile horse. By age 4, you're betrothed to a Prince of France. You barely know your own alphabet, but your marriage contract runs 22 clauses deep, and involves 3 papal blessings just to work around the awkward truth that you and your groom are, of course, cousins. First cousins, actually. The church prefers you call it dispensational. Your mother, Eleanor of England, was the daughter of Henry II, which means you're descended from 3 separate lines of cousin marriage on both sides. You're a masterpiece of genetic recycling, a walking compromise between dynastic ambition and the limits of biology. There's a quiet joke among the monks that your blood is so pure, it's sterile. You're 12 when the wedding finally happens. You don't cry. You're too well trained for that. Your new husband, Louis VIII, is polite, clean-shaven, and has the faint look of someone who hasn't quite outgrown the urge to burn ants for fun. You play your part, you bow, you smile, you let the bells ring and the wine flow and the nobles kiss your ring with damp lips. The first year is strange. The court is cold, both in temperature and temperament. Your ladies-in-waiting treat you like porcelain. The Queen Mother watches you with a hawk's gaze and a rosary in hand. You bleed early, thank God, and soon after the pressure begins. You must produce an heir, preferably several, hopefully male, definitely not deformed, and if he cries too much or takes too long to speak, people will blame you. Specifically your inbreeding. You conceive. Of course you do. They keep you on a schedule that's more precise than a church bell. You eat certain foods. You pray at certain hours. You're told to avoid looking at animals or ugly people lest the child absorb their features. Every morning the midwife rubs blessed oil on your stomach and whispers Ave Marias like incantations. You try not to flinch. Your first child is healthy, a boy. He cries with strength, feeds well, and has Louis's nose and your jaw, a combination the portrait artist will spend years trying to soften. You name him Louis, like his father. Or was it for your grandfather? Honestly, it gets hard to tell. All the names blend together after a while. Royal families don't like inventiveness. They like predictability. And you, Blanche, are nothing if not predictable. Your husband is distant but not cruel. His love is saved for war, not wives. When he leaves on campaign, You run the kingdom like a very tired, very sharp-eyed shadow queen. You read letters. You seal decrees. You press your lips together when a nobleman speaks over you, and then quietly ensure his castle is taxed twice the next quarter. You're patient, focused, and quietly terrified that your children will inherit more than just your titles. Here's your historical fact. Blanche of Castile was the queen consort of Louis VIII and the mother of Louis IX, later known as Saint Louis. She served as a regent twice, once during her husband's absence and again during her son's minority, and is credited with keeping the French crown intact through rebellion, war, and dynastic intrigue. She was formidable, deeply religious, and not afraid to crush a rebellion with absolute force. Fringe fact? Blanche was obsessed with moral purity and control. She reportedly inspected her ladies-in-waiting to ensure their chastity, and once removed a young noblewoman from court for laughing too freely in the presence of men. But privately she was rumoured to suffer from insomnia and chronic headaches. One monk claimed she slept with clove-stuffed linen pressed to her temples to keep the demons out. Or maybe just the migraines. The debate surrounding Blanche isn't about her competence. Everyone agrees she ran the kingdom with an iron rosary. But about her intensity. Was her rigid discipline a natural result of her upbringing? Or was it the side effect of living in a constant state of genetic and political anxiety? Some historians argue that her obsessive religiosity was a coping mechanism for a life where her body was not her own, and her bloodline was both weapon and wound. By the time your son takes the throne, you're already half mummified in black velvet. You serve as his regent with the kind of precise, unwavering control usually reserved for apothecaries and executioners. You trust no one. You rarely eat in public. You never remove your gloves. You believe in God, but you believe more in silence and surveillance. And you are always, always watching. Your body starts to betray you in small, sharp ways. Your fingers swell in winter. You develop a tremor in your right eye. Your joints lock when you kneel for too long, and you need help rising. Old age, they say. But you're not that old. You're just a vessel that's been used too many times, filled with too many echoes of ancestors who should have diversified their marriages a few generations ago. You outlive your husband. You outmaneuver your enemies. You outpray everyone. But you know it's not enough. You see it in your grandchildren. The ones who cough too much. The ones whose eyes don't quite focus. The ones who can't keep up with their tutors, no matter how many saints you invoke. Still, you do your duty. You attend the baptisms, arrange the betrothals, send out ambassadors, with instructions so precise they practically hum with threat. You hold the kingdom together through sheer force of maternal will and the occasional well-placed bribe. No one dares oppose you, because they know that if they do, you'll smile, pray for their soul, and then ruin them within the week. And at night, you sit alone in your chambers, a single candle flickering beside you. You sip bitter wine, wrap your aching feet in wool, and stare at a prayer book you've memorized by heart. You don't pray, not really. You just mouth the words, because you know, somewhere deep in that ancient collapsing bloodline of yours, that no amount of faith will undo what's already written in your veins. It's spring now, somewhere south of the Alps, and you're born screaming. Not in terror, but in triumph, like someone who already knows she's going to be important. Your name is Beatrice of Provence, and before you've even opened your eyes, your mother is already calculating dowries in her head. You're the youngest of 4 sisters, each more beautiful and politically valuable than the last, and if your family has anything to say about it, you'll all marry like queens, which sounds glamorous, but you know better, because every single one of your sisters is going to marry a man who is, surprise, a cousin. They call you the 4 daughters of Raymond Berengar, as if you were a girl group from the 13th century with matching gowns and royal ambitions. There's Margaret, who marries the King of France, Eleanor, who marries the King of England, Sanchia, who gets a King of Germany, and then there's you, Beatrice, who lands Charles of Anjou, baby brother of the King of France and just genetically distant enough that you probably won't sprout a second nose. Though it's still a coin toss. Your childhood is spent in a golden corner of southern France, with lavender in the air and politics in the pantry. Even as a child, you know you're being trained for something. Your tutors teach you not just Latin and courtly manners, but how to flatter, how to evade, how to smile just the right amount. You memorize the family tree twice, because there's a good chance you'll be married into it somewhere along the way. By age 12, you're already taller than most boys and twice as terrifying. You don't just walk, you glide. You don't just speak, you command. Even when your voice cracks, even when your knees shake. Your mother calls you her wild card, and that's saying something when your sisters are already sitting next to thrones. When your father dies unexpectedly, chaos breaks loose like rats from a wine cellar. Your inheritance is enormous, and everyone wants it, including your own sisters. Margaret, now Queen of France, throws a royal tantrum. Eleanor drafts letters that sound suspiciously like threats, and you quietly marry Charles of Anjou under a tree before anyone can stop you. Because love? Oh, please. You know better. It's not about love, it's about land. And Charles wants Provence. He just has to get you first. Of course, Charles is a Capetian prince, descended from the same royal bloodline that loops through half your family. You share a great-grandparent or two, maybe 3. The genealogy gets murky after a while, but you both have that look. Sharp cheekbones, elongated noses, eyes like storm clouds over silver. You could be siblings. That doesn't bother anyone. In fact, it reassures them. Marriage to Charles is functional. He's ambitious, brutal, and somehow more interested in conquest than in you, which is fine by you. You don't need affection. You need freedom. And so you use him like he uses you. He gets Provence. You get power. Not the kind they paint on coins. The kind that comes in whispers and glances and the ability to tilt the balance of an entire continent just by suggesting a marriage. Here's your historical fact. Beatrice of Provence married Charles I of Anjou, brother of King Louis IX of France. Her sisters truly did marry into the royal houses of France, England, and Germany. This rare feat of sibling power made the 4 sisters political legends. Beatrice's marriage gave Charles the lands of Provence, which he later used as a launching pad to claim the Kingdom of Sicily. Spoiler alert, it ends in flames. And now for something wonderfully weird. During this time, it was believed that birth order had magical effects on personality. Being the youngest, you were thought to be passionate, cunning, and dangerously ambitious. So when Beatrice moved politically faster than her older sisters, some blamed her astrological alignment, others just blamed her Provençal blood. No one blamed the massive intermarrying that probably left her with migraines and chronic stomach issues before age 20. Here's the debate. Beatrice's bold marriage to Charles caused massive political fallout, especially among her sisters. Some historians argue that she betrayed her family, especially Margaret, who saw herself as the rightful heir to their father's lands. Others say Beatrice was simply outmanoeuvring everyone in a system that never really gave her a fair shot. It's hard to say whether she was brilliant or just desperate. Possibly both. You give Charles children, of course. Your womb isn't yours any more than your lands are. You deliver sons with wide jaws and suspiciously short fingers, daughters with long necks and the same haunted look your sister's children wear. You hear rumours that your nephew in England has fits when he's tired, that your niece in France faints during fasts. You say nothing. You know the signs. You've seen them in your mirror. You age faster than your portraits suggest. The artists make your eyes brighter, your chin less sharp. They paint your hands smaller, more delicate. But in real life, you ache. Your knees lock up when you kneel. Your jaw clicks when you speak too quickly. There's a lump in your throat that the physicians can't explain, but which you name silently, lineage. You watch Charles as he becomes King of Sicily through fire and force. You sit beside him at coronations with a smile that doesn't reach your temples. You dress your children in silk and say prayers over their beds. You wonder which one will break first, which one carries too much of you and not enough of the world outside this cursed bloodline. When you die, and it's not dramatic, just long and grey and slow, they bury you in Naples, far from your sisters, far from Provence. Your tomb is carved with angels and lions and an inscription that reads like poetry but feels like irony. Beloved queen, pious wife. Not a word about your cleverness, or your sacrifices, or the fact that you outlived your sisters by years and still died younger than you should have. The 4 sisters, they'll call you. Daughters of one house, married to 3 kings and 1 monster with a crown. But beneath the legends there's the truth. 4 women, bound by ambition, and the kind of DNA that whispers when you're alone. You never had a chance, but you made one, and if you're lucky, no one will look too closely at your children's bones. It starts with your knees, a dull ache when you kneel during mass, then a sharp jab as you try to rise, your silk skirts pooling around your ankles like a trap. You're only 9, but your body already resents gravity. The palace physicians chalk it up to the weather. Too damp, too cold, too foreign. But the truth is, your joints are whispering secrets your family won't say out loud. You are Mary of Burgundy, daughter of Charles the Bold and granddaughter to one of the most intricately entangled dynasties in European history. And your bones are protesting centuries of recycled DNA. Your father is dead, just like that. Crushed beneath his own ambition at the Battle of Nancy, his corpse stripped by looters, face frozen in disbelief. You never got to say goodbye. He was supposed to make you a queen. Instead, he left you an orphan, an heiress, and, most dangerously, a prize. At 10 years old, you inherit more land than most kings and a set of shoulders too narrow to carry it all. Everyone wants a piece of you, literally. The kings of France, Spain, England, each sends proposals that sound a lot like ownership papers. You're described in diplomatic letters like livestock, strong frame, pious temperament, good teeth. No mention of your trembling hands, no footnote about the occasional dizzy spells, certainly nothing about how your left kneecap dislocates when you trip on stairs, which happens more often than it should. The Habsburgs move fast. Emperor Frederick III sends his son Maximilian to marry you before the French can snatch you away. You meet him once before the wedding. He's tall, well-dressed, and suspiciously polite. He's also your distant cousin, because of course he is. That's practically a requirement. The union is arranged in record time, and just like that, you become a political hinge upon which half of Europe will swing. The marriage is fine, cold but respectful. Maximilian isn't cruel, just busy, more focused on military strategy than your fragile knees or your increasing migraines. He calls you meine Frau like it's a formal title, not a relationship. Still, you like him better than most men you've met, which isn't saying much. Here's your historical fact. Mary of Burgundy was the only child of Charles the Bold and heiress to the vast Burgundian territories. Her sudden inheritance made her one of the most sought-after women in Europe. She married Archduke Maximilian of Austria in 1477, uniting the Burgundian and Habsburg houses, and setting the stage for centuries of continental power plays, and yes, intense inbreeding. Let's get weird. Mary was an expert equestrian, trained in falconry, and insisted on riding with her knights. Not side saddle, full tilt, armour and all. She was a warrior princess hybrid decades before Disney made it cute. But her love of riding would also be her undoing, more on that soon. The scholarly debate surrounding Mary centres on how much agency she really had. Was she just a pawn, handed from father to husband like a sealed envelope? Or was she more calculating, using her limited power to preserve her autonomy as best she could in a world designed to erase women? Her private correspondence suggests intelligence, strategy, and yes, fear. But she also rode into battle beside her men, and not many princesses did that. Your body begins to betray you slowly. You miscarry once, maybe twice. The court never confirms it, but you remember the bleeding, the quiet servants, the sudden hush in the hallways. Your surviving children are pale and sickly. Your son, Philip, has trouble with fevers. Your daughter, Margaret, sweet, serious, and too wise for her age, blinks in the candlelight like the world's already too bright for her. You try not to worry, but the signs are there. The same signs that echoed through your ancestors: uneven limbs, tremors, the occasional slip into catatonic silence. You've read the family chronicles, you know the patterns, you see them every time you look in the mirror and notice the faint purplish smudge under your eyes that no amount of pearl dust can hide. Still, you ride. Every day. It's the only time you feel like yourself. The wind, the leather reins, the thud of hooves beneath you. It's freedom, or the closest thing to it. Even if your knees scream with each gallop, even if the pain shoots up your spine and curls into the base of your skull, you should have stopped riding. You know this. Everyone told you. But you don't. Because you're stubborn. Because you're tired of being a symbol. Because you'd rather die on a horse than live another day surrounded by velvet and politics. And so it happens. A fall. A flash of pain so sharp it silences the world. Your horse slips on wet stone. You go flying, ribs first into a tree stump. There's blood. So much blood. You try to stand, but your leg isn't bending right. You see Maximilian's face, shocked and pale, hovering above you like a saint or a ghost. Then everything fades. They carry you back to the palace. The best physicians in Europe are summoned, but none can stop the slow collapse of your body. Infection sets in, your chest swells, your breathing turns to a rattle, and through it all you try to stay awake, because you haven't finished writing your will, your children are too young, your husband is too distracted, and your lands, too tempting for every greedy cousin in Christendom. You scribble names with shaking hands, you underline Margaret's name 3 times, you hope someone notices, you die within days, 25 years old, gone before your knees had the chance to fully betray you. The bells toll for hours. People weep genuinely, because you weren't just a duchess. You were a hinge, and now the door is off the wall. They bury you with fanfare and roses. The tomb is grand, the epitaph noble, but your blood lives on, and it won't rest. It coils through your son, Philip the Handsome, who will pass it on to Charles V, and so on, each generation tightening the genetic thread like a noose. So yes, you died young, but your legacy? It's just getting warmed up. And your jaw? It'll echo through history. You're 5 years old, standing in front of a mirror trying not to cry. The gown is too heavy, the jewels on your bodice press like little fists into your chest, and the French ladies in waiting keep fussing with your hair like you're a doll, not a person. You've been told, sweetly, constantly, and with increasing urgency, that today is your wedding day. You look into the mirror and repeat what you've been taught. I am Queen of England. But you don't feel like a queen. You feel like a hostage in brocade. Your name is Isabella of Valois, and the man you're marrying is King Richard II. He's 29. You're 6. Yes, 6. Now, everyone at court insists this is perfectly normal, strategic, wise, politically brilliant. It will unify France and England, they say. Heal old wounds, secure peace. No one mentions the obvious, that this marriage is less about peace and more about stalling another round of war while 2 kingdoms hold their breath. And you, a child bride, hold a man's future in your tiny trembling hands. Richard is kind to you, at first. He speaks gently, calls you ma chère enfant, and promises he won't touch you until you're older, which is the medieval version of romance, apparently. You sit beside him on a throne that could swallow you whole. Your feet don't touch the floor, your crown is too big, your fingers twitch with nerves when people kiss your hand. You keep trying to act like a queen, but your front teeth are still wobbly. One falls out during a banquet. You were born into Valois blood, a royal house so tangled that the family tree might as well be a topiary maze. Your parents are cousins. Your grandparents were cousins. Your uncles and aunts marry other uncles and aunts like it's a party game no one ever ends. You have that translucent skin, the kind that bruises like summer fruit, and long, pale fingers that twist when you sleep. The court thinks it's elegant. The servants know better. Your immune system is fragile. You catch every chill, every fever, every stomach flutter that moves through the palace. The court physicians bring you brews that smell like mouldy lemons and tell you to stay indoors. You stare out the window while birds flutter past and wonder if your bones will always feel this thin. Here's your historical fact. Isabella of Valois did, in fact, marry King Richard II of England at the age of 6. The marriage was political, intended to solidify a temporary peace during the 100 Years' War. While the marriage was not consummated due to her age, she was treated as queen and was crowned accordingly. When Richard was later deposed and died, or was murdered, historians debate this, Isabella was returned to France and remarried at 16 to the future Charles, Duke of Orleans. And now, the fringe fact. There were court astrologers present at Isabella's wedding, claiming the alignment of the stars foretold stability and grace. These same astrologers also advised against her riding horses in the spring, and said she should avoid eating eggs on Thursdays. Spoiler, none of this helped prevent what came next. The scholarly debate around Isabella lies in her legacy. Was she a tragic victim of political machinations, or a pawn who was later reshaped into a symbol of innocence lost? Her early marriage and the trauma that followed have been romanticised in poems and plays, but the truth was likely colder, lonelier, and filled with long hours of ceremonial silence. When Richard is overthrown, you're just 8. You don't understand why the guards no longer bow, why the food is less rich, why no one speaks your name above a whisper. Your husband is locked away in Pontefract Castle, where he either starves himself or is quietly murdered depending on which rumour you believe. You ask to see him. You're told he's on a spiritual retreat. You don't believe it. You're sent back to France, still wearing widow's black, even though you've never kissed your husband, never slept beside him, never had the chance to be anything more than a child with a crown too big. You return to the French court older in spirit, quieter in voice, with hands that never stop twitching. You're 10. Your family doesn't quite know what to do with you. You've been queen, you've been married, you've been widowed, and now you're inconvenient. So they plot another marriage. This time to Charles, Duke of Orléans, your cousin's son. He's only 11, so at least this time the age gap won't raise eyebrows, or require papal dispensations that reek of desperation. The marriage takes place in silence, no bells, no feasting, just two young royals sitting beside each other, stiff and solemn, hands folded like pages in a forgotten prayer book. You don't love him, you don't even know him, but you know the rules, you know what's expected. Your life will be one long ritual of waiting, to bleed, to breed, to fade. You walk the gardens alone most days, your gown trailing in the dew, your mind flickering between memories and imagined futures. You think of England, of Richard's sad smile, of the cold coronation chamber where you first felt like an artifact. You think of your own children. Will they come? Will they survive? Or will they be pale and brittle like your cousin who coughed himself to death before his 12th birthday? One evening you collapse without warning. Your vision goes black, your knees buckle, and when you wake your ladies are weeping. The physician says it's a fainting fit, possibly from nerves, but you know better. Something in you has cracked, something passed down like an heirloom, quiet, hereditary, fatal. You live, but something changes. You stop speaking as often, you learn to paint, you learn to stay still for hours, you become something between a girl and a ghost, a former queen who never quite learned how to be a person. And when you finally die, at 19, it feels anticlimactic. You pass quietly in bed, no grand final speech, no dramatic final breath. The court mourns briefly, the bells toll, a few poems are written, and then the world moves on. But you never really did. You've been groomed for this moment since you were old enough to understand what a crown meant. Not just the weight of it, but the expectation, the silent, glittering contract it lays across your shoulders. You are Catherine of Aragon, first daughter of the legendary Catholic monarchs, Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile. You are born into power, baptized in politics, and, unsurprisingly, saturated in your own family's DNA. Your parents are second cousins, their parents were cousins. You have more royal blood than platelets. You grow up in the Alhambra, that marble-drenched dream of a palace, surrounded by tutors, priests, ladies-in-waiting, and the endless echo of your family's achievements. Your mother just conquered Granada, kicked out the last Muslim ruler in Iberia, and financed that Genoese guy who's about to get very lost. Your father, meanwhile, is busy rewriting Spain's map. You are a pearl among daggers, and you know it. You're beautiful, fluent in Latin, and devout in a way that makes bishops smile. But beneath your stiff bodice and prayerful eyes, your stomach turns. You've been promised to Arthur, Prince of Wales, since before you could read. It's a classic dynastic match, Spain and England, Catholic and Catholic, Habsburg-adjacent bloodlines fusing like puzzle pieces that were never meant to fit. At age 15, you're shipped to England, across cold, churning waters, into a country where the air smells like damp stone and boiled meat. Arthur is polite, thin, and fragile-looking, like a candle in a draught. You marry him in a haze of ceremony and incense, walking stiffly down the aisle in a gown that took 14 servants to carry. The wedding night is awkward. You're told to smile. You do. And then, barely 6 months later, Arthur is dead. Sweating sickness, they call it. You barely had time to memorize the shape of his face. Now you're a widow in a foreign land, alone except for a household of Spanish staff who whisper rosaries over you at night, unsure if you'll be sent home or buried in the English rain. Here's your historical fact. Catherine of Aragon was indeed married to Arthur Tudor first. After his death, she was betrothed to his younger brother Henry. But there was a complication. Her marriage to Arthur had been consummated, or not. It depended on who you asked, when, and what was politically convenient at the time. The Pope had to issue a special dispensation for her to marry Henry. That one night, or lack of one, would become a weapon later, sharpened and wielded during one of history's messiest divorces. Fringe fact, Catherine claimed all her life that she and Arthur had never consummated the marriage. Even under enormous pressure, she held to this story. Was she telling the truth? Or was she protecting her second marriage, her daughter, and her place in history? Some historians have speculated Arthur was too sickly to complete the act. Others believe the truth was far more uncomfortable, some combination of political pressure, personal trauma, and a deeply Catholic sense of guilt. The scholarly debate remains. Was Catherine a helpless pawn, a woman of extraordinary conviction, or both? She navigated 2 royal marriages, the Reformation, and being publicly humiliated, all while refusing to step aside or stop fighting. Some call her the first true Queen of England in the modern sense. Others see her as a symbol of stubborn tragedy. Back in England, you wait. Years pass. Henry grows into a tall, athletic boy with golden hair and dangerous charm. You see him at court. He sees you. And eventually, with enough papal paperwork and political arm-twisting, you marry. You're 23. He's barely 18. But for the first time in years, you feel like something is beginning instead of ending. The early years are good. Genuinely good. Henry writes poetry. He calls you my rose without thorns. You ride beside him, dance, smile, carry yourself like a queen who finally fits in her skin. You become pregnant quickly. The court rejoices. A male heir is expected any day. Then the child is stillborn. And so begins a long, painful unravelling. Over the next decade you become pregnant 6 times. 1 child survives, Mary, a girl. The others, boys mostly, are born early, or die in days, or simply fail to thrive. You bury them in chapels with names they barely had time to wear. You go to mass daily. You light candles until your fingertips are slick with wax. You pray to saints whose bones you've kissed. But nothing works. Your body, once a sacred symbol of alliance, becomes an object of pity. Or worse, blame. Some whisper it's the curse of inbreeding. Your mother had 7 children. Only a few reached adulthood. Your grandmother was a cousin. Your father had his own health issues hidden behind layers of armour and titles. You know what the servants are saying. The blood is thin. The line is cracked. The womb is tired. Meanwhile, Henry starts to change. The golden curls fade. His eyes grow colder. He jokes less, and he looks elsewhere. First to mistresses, then to Anne Boleyn, a woman younger than your daughter and far less obedient. When Anne refuses to be just another mistress, Henry begins his campaign, not just to divorce you, but to erase you. You resist, fiercely, publicly. You go to court and defend your marriage, standing like a storm before judges and bishops, declaring, "God is my witness, I have been a true wife." You refuse to step down, refuse to call yourself anything but queen. You lose almost everything, your title, your home, your husband's love, but not your conviction, and not your daughter. You're exiled to a damp, draughty manor. Your health fades, your joints stiffen, your vision blurs, but you keep writing letters, keep praying, keep calling yourself Queen Catherine, until the very end. And when you die, at 50, you die alone but not forgotten. Not by your people, not by Mary, who will one day take the throne in your name, and not by history, which remembers you not as Henry's cast-off, but as the first of 6, a queen with fire in her voice and ashes in her arms. You wake to the sound of bells, again. They're always ringing in the towers in your ears, sometimes even in your dreams. They're tolling for mass, or for news, or, more often than you'd like, for someone who's just died. You are Joanna, Infanta of Castile, Queen of Aragon, Duchess of Burgundy, and heiress to the vastest collection of titles on the continent. But most people won't remember you for any of that. No, they'll remember you as Joanna the Mad, Juana la Loca, the woman who slept beside her husband's corpse, the queen who talked to walls, the problem no one could solve. You're the daughter of Ferdinand and Isabella, same as Catherine. You share her face, her sharp cheekbones, her piety, but not her luck. Or maybe your luck is so deep it circles back around into tragedy. You grow up in the same sunlit Spanish palaces, studying theology, Latin, music, all the skills required of a royal woman who'll be married off like a blessed hostage. You're smarter than most men at court. Everyone says so. Quietly. You're married off at 16 to Philip the Handsome, son of Maximilian I and Mary of Burgundy. Yes, that Mary, the one who died from a fall with her jaw clenched against fate. Which means your marriage is a merging of 2 heavily interbred houses, the Trastameras of Spain and the Habsburgs of Austria. Your union is supposed to be the dawn of a new empire. Instead, it becomes your ruin. Philip is beautiful. He knows it. You know it. So do the 12 other women he seems to be entertaining while you lie alone in your chambers, sleepless and sick. You want to love him. Do love him. Madly. In the desperate clinging way of someone who has never been taught how to share. But Philip does not love you back in the same way. He smiles. He flatters. And then he disappears. For hours. For days. You scream at the walls. At the women. At him. And still he slips away. The court whispers that you're unstable, melancholic, maybe even cursed. One bad fever, one night of muttering in Latin, and suddenly you're not quite right. But no one ever asks what it's like to be 16, pregnant, terrified, and utterly alone in a castle full of schemers. Your first child is born, a boy. You name him Charles. He will grow into a conqueror, but as an infant he shrieks like something is chasing him in his sleep. You understand. Here's your historical fact. Joanna of Castile became queen of both Castile and Aragon, technically ruling over all of Spain after her mother's death. But her father, and later her son, both declared her mentally unfit to rule. She was confined for most of her adult life, first by her father, then by Charles, who took the throne in her name and promptly made her a prisoner. And now for the strange. When Philip died, suddenly at 28, possibly poisoned, you refused to bury him. For weeks you travelled across Spain with his coffin, insisting on sleeping beside it. Some said you cracked. Others said you were grieving in the only way your spirit allowed. The line between heartbreak and madness is often decided by the people who write the history books. Here's the open question. Was Joanna truly insane, or was she politically inconvenient? Many modern scholars argue she was gaslit by her family, used as a puppet, and strategically labelled mad to prevent her from exercising her legal claim to the throne. She was intelligent, fluent in multiple languages, and politically aware, but that only made her more dangerous. After Philip's death, everything unravels faster. You give birth to more children, 6 in all, but the pregnancies wear you down. Your hair thins, your skin turns to parchment, you weep during mass, you scream at your maids, you rock back and forth in prayer for hours, days. It becomes harder to tell what's devotion and what's despair. Your father has you locked away in Tordesillas. The fortress is cold and dark, with iron locks and shuttered windows. You're told it's for your safety. You're not allowed to rule, not allowed to leave, not allowed to mourn. Years pass, decades. You speak less, you sleep more. Sometimes you forget your children's names. Sometimes you repeat them like rosary beads, one by one, until your lips are dry. Charles visits once. He kisses your hand. His eyes are already like his father's, hard, clever, calculating. He promises you'll be remembered. You believe him? You shouldn't. You're still queen in name, but only in name. Your signature is forged, your seal used without your knowledge, your orders overridden. You're a symbol with no power, a woman whose blood built an empire but whose name is smudged with madness. You outlive your husband, your parents, your freedom. You live until 75, locked in the same rooms, pacing the same corridors, whispering the same prayers. They say you're mad, but how could you not be? You dream sometimes of open windows, of sunlight on your face, of riding across Spain beside Philip before the betrayals, before the coffins. You dream of being believed, and when death finally comes, it is not dramatic. It is not tragic. It is quiet. A flutter in the chest, a hand grown still. You die as you lived, misunderstood, misdiagnosed and carefully erased, but your blood lives on, through Charles, through his son Philip II, through the long, pale line of Habsburgs and Bourbons and all the kings with jaws too square and hearts too narrow. Your madness becomes legend, your intelligence forgotten, your grief immortal. Because sometimes it's easier to call a woman crazy than to admit she was right. You are Margaret Tudor, and you're tired before you're even born. Your very name is stitched with expectation. Daughter of Henry VII, sister to Henry VIII, a Tudor in the truest sense, strategically bred, delicately positioned, and genetically, well, compact. Your blood is a cocktail of Lancastrian and Yorkist feuding, barely cooled after the Wars of the Roses. It carries the weight of English peace, the glint of red gold hair, and just enough overlap in the family tree to give the midwives pause. You're raised in cold halls lined with banners and ghosts. They wrap you in velvet and call you princess before your baby teeth fall out. At court, you're an ornament of power, a bargaining chip disguised as a daughter. You watch your father pace with the anxiety of a man who got the crown by force and kept it by marrying his cousin. You watch your brother Henry grow larger, louder, more dangerous by the day. You watch your mother die of childbirth complications, and though no one says it aloud, you know, it's not just luck, it's the blood. It always is. When you're 13, they tell you you're going to be queen, not just queen, but the Queen of Scots. You smile, nod, rehearse your Latin phrases and memorise the treaty. The reality is, you're being packed up and sent off to marry James IV of Scotland, a man you've never met but already outranks you in years, height and body count. The union is meant to seal peace between two countries that would rather drown each other in their own mud. James is handsome, charismatic, occasionally terrifying. Your wedding is loud and glorious, all tartan and harp music and too much wine. You bleed on the wedding night, thank God. There is no room for suspicion when it comes to royal women. Your virginity has been your most valuable asset up to now. It's gone, so now you have to replace it with heirs, preferably boys, healthy ones. You have 6 pregnancies. 1 boy survives. You name him James, like his father. The rest, lost in blood and shadow. Your body, always fragile, begins to turn against you. You feel it in your spine, in your hips, in the strange silences that pass between the midwives. They don't tell you how many women like you die young. You already know. Here's your historical fact. Margaret Tudor married James IV of Scotland in 1503, creating a dynastic link that would later bring the Scottish line to the English throne through her great-grandson, James VI or I. After James IV was killed at the Battle of Flodden in 1513, Margaret became regent for their infant son, James V. Her life was a constant battle of power, marriages, miscarriages, and the endless consequences of being both too valuable and too replaceable. Fringe fact: Margaret loved astrology. She reportedly had her own court astrologer and made decisions, diplomatic and personal, based on the movement of the stars. She even delayed one of her weddings because of an unlucky planetary alignment, as if the stars could offset what centuries of overlapping chromosomes were already planning. The scholarly debate around Margaret Tudor revolves around her regency. Was she a savvy ruler playing a brutal hand with what tools she had? Or was she a naive woman out of her depth, constantly manipulated by the Scottish lords around her? Letters suggest both. Intelligence paired with desperation, calculation mixed with instinct, and an increasing frustration that no matter how royal you are, no one listens when your crown rests on a woman's head. After James dies, everything tilts. You're left with a kingdom that barely tolerates you and a baby too small to command respect. The lords hover, sniffing for power like dogs around a wounded deer. You remarry impulsively, unwisely. Archibald Douglas is handsome, smooth-tongued, and exactly the sort of man your council despises. The marriage is political poison, and you swallow it whole. He betrays you. Of course he does. Men always do when you're royal and slightly inconvenient. He tries to steal your son, from you. You flee, dragging your skirts through mud and wind, heading south toward the only place that might shelter you, England. But England doesn't feel like home anymore. Your brother, Henry VIII, greets you with a raised eyebrow and a suspicious mind. He blames you for your remarriage. He questions your loyalty. He watches you too closely, like a girl who's failed a test he set without telling you. You return to Scotland eventually, through gritted teeth and with fewer illusions. Your son grows older, more distant. You try to guide him, but he listens more to advisors and whispers than to his mother. Your body weakens, aches that no longer fade, joints that crack like old wood. Your eyes blur on cloudy days. You still smile at banquets, still kneel at mass, still carry yourself like a queen. But inside you're tired. Your face looks more like your father's each day. And you remember how he died. Paranoid, exhausted, betrayed by his own body and the very blood he so carefully guarded. You see the same in yourself. You feel it in your womb, your spine, your thinning hair. You see it in your grandchildren, frail, pale, prone to fevers that come like ghosts. The Tudor blood is royal, yes, but it's also fragile and laced with something too tightly wound to last. When you die, quietly, in bed, in a room that smells of herbs and regret, your son doesn't come. He's too busy with power, with women, with surviving the mess you've all inherited. You're buried with honour, but not warmth. The history books will remember your marriages, your mistakes, your offspring, but not the nights you spent rocking your miscarried children, not the whispers you endured in court hallways, not the dreams you had of being more than a pawn with a uterus. Your legacy is blood, not just spilled, but passed down, and one day it will reach your granddaughter, Mary, Queen of Scots, and all the fire, sorrow, and genetic reckoning you've carried will burn again. You are Mary of Guise, and from the moment you draw breath you're considered unusually tall. Not just tall for a girl, tall for anyone. The kind of height that makes men clear their throats when they meet you and priests wonder aloud if perhaps it's some divine sign. It's not. It's genetics, plain and complicated. Your blood is a rich stew of French nobility, tightly simmered across generations of intermarriage. You're a Lorraine. Yes, those Lorraines. The kind of family that marries up, down, sideways, and usually back into itself. You're born in Bar-le-Duc, where the hills roll gently, and the air always smells faintly of damp wood and horses. As a child, your limbs grow faster than your dresses can keep up. Your governess winces every time you hit another growth spurt. By 10, you're taller than most men at court. By 14, you're being whispered about in the corridors. Some call you majestic. Others say you look like a knight in disguise. You're clever, but no one particularly cares. You're devout, which helps. You're also sturdy, with broad shoulders and hips that midwives eye approvingly. You're built to bear children, strong ones, hopefully royal ones. Your first marriage is to Louis of Orleans, Duke of Longueville. He's decent enough, and importantly not your first cousin, just a more distant blood relative, which counts as refreshing in your circle. You have 2 sons with him, one survives. Louis dies of illness shortly after, and suddenly you're a 21-year-old widow with a toddler and an exceptionally marketable womb. Your family does what noble families do. They reshuffle the board. This time, they play you as a queen. The offer comes from Scotland. Their king, James V, has already lost one wife, Madeleine of Valois, your countrywoman, who died months into their marriage from what the physicians called consumption, and everyone else called too much cousin blood. Now he needs a replacement. He wants another French bride, and your name is next on the list. You pause. Scotland is cold, damp, and politically unstable. You've heard the stories. You know they bathe maybe once a month and consider oatmeal a gourmet meal. But you also know what's at stake. You agree, because that's what royal women do. You sail north, heart steady, spine straight, sea wind tearing at your veil. James is charming at first, lively, proud, not quite as reckless as his cousin Henry VIII, but cut from the same cloth, one dyed with vanity and lined with desperation for sons. You give him 2, one dies, then you give him a daughter, and then James dies, just days after her birth. So here you are, Queen Dowager of Scotland, mother of the new queen, Mary, infant sovereign of a turbulent kingdom, wrapped in fine linen and inherited chaos. You are 32, and already one of the most politically dangerous women in Europe. Here's your historical fact. Mary of Guise became Queen of Scotland through her marriage to James V. Upon his death, their daughter, Mary Stuart, was crowned Queen of Scots as a newborn. Mary of Guise ruled as regent for her daughter during a violent period marked by religious conflict, foreign interference, and constant rebellion. She held the country together with diplomatic skill and an iron spine, while fighting off both English invasions and Protestant uprisings. Strange fact. Mary reportedly kept her French household even while in Scotland, surrounding herself with French-speaking ladies, musicians and cooks. The Scots resented this, called it excessive, foreign, even unholy. They didn't trust her papist ways or her height, or her French perfume that smelled like crushed violets and authority. The scholarly debate is about Mary's regency. Some see her as a stabilising force, trying to bring peace to a kingdom tearing itself apart between Catholicism and Protestant reform. Others argue she clung too tightly to French influence, alienated local nobles, and ultimately paved the way for her daughter's disastrous reign. One thing is certain, she was trapped between loyalties, to France, to Scotland, to her daughter, and to a system that never allowed her to rest. Your regency is a chessboard soaked in rain. Every move you make must be calculated in 3 languages and blessed by 4 different factions. You write letters until your fingers ache. You hold court even as your hair greys early from stress. You survive attempted coups, rumours of assassination, and even a Protestant pamphlet that calls you the foreign she-wolf of the papists. Your body begins to turn against you. The aches deepen. Your knees throb. Some mornings you cannot rise from bed without assistance. Physicians say it's dropsy. Others say it's your heart. But you know. You've known for years. It's the same thing that took your sisters, your nieces, your friends. The blood. The exhaustion bred into your bones by centuries of political pairings and dynastic recycling. You try to prepare Mary. She's clever, bright, heartbreakingly beautiful, and far too young to carry the burden ahead. You teach her French, Latin, manners. You shield her from Scottish cold and Scottish politics. Eventually you send her to France, where she'll marry into the Valois line and plunge straight into another genetic trap. But for now, you hope she has a chance. A slim one. When death comes, you are 54. The Protestants refuse to let you be buried in Scotland. They say you're a symbol of tyranny, of foreign control, of Catholic decay. So your body is embalmed and sent back to France, where you'll rest with your family, among the bones of women who married cousins, ruled kingdoms, and paid the price in pain. They say you were proud, too French, too Catholic, too tall. But what they forget is that you held the country together when every man around you failed. You mothered a queen, you survived 2 crowns, and you died without ever seeing peace in the land you tried to protect. Your legacy is complicated, like your blood, like your daughters, like all the women who came before you, bred for crowns, broken by them. You're small when it starts, not in presence. You'll never be small in presence, but in age. You're Anne of Brittany, the last independent Duchess of Brittany, and eventually the only woman in French history to be crowned queen twice. Twice. That's not ambition, that's survival. You're born into a corner of France that doesn't want to be France. Brittany is proud, rich, fiercely independent, and you are the precious vessel through which it must continue. Congratulations, you're not just a child, you're a duchy wrapped in velvet. The blood running through your veins is noble, tangled, and alarmingly narrow. The Breton nobility, like the rest of Europe's elite, has spent centuries exchanging daughters and cousins like cattle at a very exclusive judgmental market. You're the product of that. Intelligent, spirited, and already showing signs of the family trait. Fainting spells when the air gets too thin, and a right foot that drags slightly when you're tired. You're 11 when the wars begin to truly encroach. France wants Brittany. Brittany wants independence. You want a day without advisors whispering about betrothals in the next room. You're promised to Maximilian of Austria by proxy. He sends a representative who places a ring on your finger, a ceremony performed with all the gravity of a royal wedding, minus the groom. You're officially married to a man you've never seen. At least he's your cousin. That makes it comfortable, right? But France is not amused. Charles VIII, boy king with ambition and thin patience, invades Brittany. His soldiers march through your towns. His banners flap over your forests. Your marriage to Maximilian is declared invalid by sheer force of will and sharpened sword. You're pressured, politely at first, then less so, to marry Charles instead. You resist. You resist again. And then, finally, at 13, you agree. Because what other choice is left? You marry Charles in a chapel thick with incense and expectations. You weep during the ceremony, not because you're overwhelmed with joy, but because the vows make you promise that Brittany will become part of France, that your home, your culture, your people, everything you've ever known, is now a crown jewel in a kingdom that has always treated it like a wild outpost. You're not just losing your name, you're losing your country. Still, you wear the crown. You sit beside Charles and try to play queen while mourning your duchy like a beloved sister. You wear stiff bodices embroidered with fleur-de-lis instead of Breton hermines. You learn to smile. You give birth, many times. 10, to be exact. Only a few survive. Some don't make it past a week. One is stillborn. Your body becomes a battlefield, torn by pregnancies, haunted by absences. Here's your historical fact. Anne of Brittany married Charles VIII in 1491, and, after his death, married his cousin and successor, Louis XII. This made her Queen of France twice, uniquely in the history of the French monarchy. She bore at least 14 children between both marriages. Only 2 survived infancy, both daughters. Strange but true, Anne insisted on wearing black during her pregnancies, not as mourning, but as a form of spiritual discipline. She believed it kept her humble, protected her unborn child from evil spirits, and reminded everyone in court that motherhood, especially royal motherhood, was dangerous. She also slept in a separate room from her husband's after each birth, swearing off intimacy for weeks as both penance and protest. The open debate around Anne's legacy centres on her identity. Was she the last sovereign of Brittany, clinging fiercely to independence? Or did she ultimately sell out her duchy in exchange for French prestige and personal power? Her letters suggest she never stopped fighting for Breton autonomy. She demanded her children be raised with knowledge of Brittany's history and language. But at the end of the day, Brittany became France. Her body became France. And both were reshaped beyond recognition. When Charles dies, suddenly and stupidly, he hits his head on a doorframe while walking too quickly to a game of tennis. You're left, again, with nothing. You're 21, a widow, a duchess stripped of her homeland, but not done. Within a year, Louis XII wants to marry you. Wants is generous. Needs, more like. He annuls his first marriage to a woman who can't give him children, and you, tragically fertile and politically useful, are waiting in the wings. You agree. Again. You demand the right to retain your duchy's independence. Again. You wear a second crown. Again. And you hope, against reason, that this time your children will survive. They don't. You bury child after child. You wear mourning like a second skin. Your back begins to bend. Your voice fades to a whisper. Your bones creak like ship hulls in the wind. The court praises your dignity. They do not mention the nosebleeds, the limp, the months you spend in bed unable to lift your head without vertigo. You're dying by inches. You design your own tomb while you're still alive. It's elaborate, of course, but filled with symbols of mourning, resistance, and stubborn identity. You include your Breton coat of arms, not France's. You commission a sculpture of yourself in full coronation regalia, but with your eyes closed. You want the world to know that you were queen, yes, but you were more. You were a duchess, a mother, a fighter, a woman whose womb became a graveyard. You die at 36, drenched in pain, surrounded by priests and perfumes that can't quite mask the smell of something unravelling. You leave behind one daughter, Claude, who will marry into yet another tangled web of French nobility, continuing the spiral. Your tomb becomes famous. People weep when they see it, not because of the artistry, but because of the quiet sorrow baked into every inch of stone. You ruled France, twice, but your heart never left Brittany. And your body? It gave everything and was still found wanting. They'll call you a queen, they'll call you a mother. But few will say the obvious. You were one of the most inbred women in Europe, fed a diet of power and prayer, expected to birth a dynasty out of thin air, and blamed when the children didn't live. You walk into the room like you already know how the story ends, because you do. You've been watching queens fall your whole life. Some crumple under the weight of their crowns, others under the weight of their wombs. But you, Christina of Denmark, you come from a long line of women who knew how to read a room and then own it. You were born in 1521 to a mother who barely survived your delivery, and a father who died when you were 5. Most little girls lose parents to war or disease. You lost yours to royal breeding. Welcome to Europe. Your blood is thick with Habsburg ancestry. Your maternal grandmother was Mary of Burgundy. Your paternal family, the Oldenburgs, are no genetic saints either. By the time you can walk, your tutors are already reciting your family tree like a hymn, and your nursemaids are whispering that your jawline has the look. You know what that means. The look. That slight forward thrust. That wide angle. That faint promise of the infamous Habsburg jaw. The one that seems to arrive without invitation, like a bad omen at a christening. Still, you're beautiful. Striking, really. Dark brows, regal bearing. A confidence that's either earned or inherited. You're orphaned young, but raised among the best. You're fluent in Latin and Italian by age 8. You fence with boys and win. You take communion with the poise of someone twice your age. People say you have your aunt's eyes. Which aunt? Doesn't matter. They're probably the same person twice over. At 16, you're already a widow. They married you off young, of course they did, to Francesco II Sforza, Duke of Milan. You were barely 15 when you arrived, all silk and politics. He was older, sicker, and shaped like a question mark. Consumption, the doctors said. Some strange internal wasting, which is poetic considering Milan had been wasting under bad rule and bad blood for decades. You were married for a year. Maybe. He died, mercifully fast. You wore black. Not too much. Weeping too hard over a Habsburg cousin husband wouldn't have been fashionable, but you made an impression, especially on the artists. Here's your historical fact. Christina of Denmark became a widow before 17 and was quickly pulled into a swirl of European marriage proposals. The most famous came from England's Henry VIII, not long after the whole Anne Boleyn head situation. Christina's portrait, painted by Hans Holbein, was sent ahead of her as part of the courtship. That painting would become legendary, not because the marriage happened, but because of what she said. And here's the fringe fact. When asked about marrying Henry VIII, Christina allegedly replied, "If I had 2 heads, I would gladly put one at the disposal of the King of England." That line lives on in every history nerd's heart, not just because it's witty, but because it was the perfect burn, delivered with the cool disinterest of a woman who knew exactly what happened to wives in that particular court. Now here's the debate. Was Christina dodging a bullet or playing a long game? Some scholars think she could have been a Queen of England had she accepted, and maybe even managed Henry better than his actual wives. Others argue she was too smart for that nonsense and used wit to keep herself out of danger. What's clear is that she had more self-awareness than half the women born into royal bloodlines before her. You stay single for a little while, not out of mourning, out of strategy. You're the Duchess everyone wants but can't quite secure. Too Habsburg to ignore, too clever to manipulate. When you finally do remarry, it's to Francis, Duke of Lorraine. Not a bad match. He's less inbred than average, which in your world is practically erotic. You give birth to 5 children. The pregnancies are hard. You get nosebleeds in the mornings, dizzy spells that last for days. Your joints swell. You're told it's nerves. Of course it's nerves. That's always what they say when the body's breaking down from the inside out and no one has the language or courage to call it what it is, degeneration. You manage your household like a statesman. Letters, trade deals, religious arrangements. When your husband dies, you take over. Regent of Lorraine, ruler in all but name, mother to a dynasty that's already starting to show signs of your inherited intensity. Your sons are sharp, quick, and vaguely distant. Your daughters are delicate and hauntingly pale. You make sure the family line continues. You even raise your nephew Charles, yes, that Charles, the future Duke of Lorraine who will marry into French royalty and keep the whole genetically compromised carousel spinning. You know how this works. You're not shocked anymore when you see a child with a drooping eye or a grandchild whose jaw won't quite close. There's a moment, you're nearing 50, when you sit for another portrait. The artist is nervous. You're not the easy, girlish subject he hoped for. You stare directly at him, spine straight, eyes sharp. He asks if you want to be painted with a prayer book or a rose. You say, "Paint me as I am." No symbols. They already know who I am. You live into your 50s, long enough to see the next generation make the same mistakes. You attend weddings with forced smiles. You bless pregnancies that you know may not end well. You drink wine that tastes of iron and sugar and remember the names of women who didn't make it past childbirth. You carry yourself like a survivor, because you are one. And when you finally die, it's quietly, without fanfare. They say you were regal to the end. They dress you in black one last time. The bells toll. The artists argue over which portrait will be your legacy. The young widow in Holbein's brush, or the older woman with a stare like steel and sorrow. But you know the truth. You were born into a bloodline that wrote stories in jawlines and wombs. You outlived more than most. You left no romantic legend, no tragic fall. You were never beheaded, never abandoned, never coddled. You said no, and lived. You wake in the heart of France, surrounded by silk sheets, gold thread, and the coldest kind of love, the ceremonial kind. You are Catherine de' Medici, daughter of one of Europe's richest banking dynasties, and a woman whose ancestry is so tangled, it's a wonder you don't glow in the dark from all the overlapping bloodlines. Your mother was a Bourbon, your father a Medici, your cousins, too many to count, and too many to legally marry, but it never stopped anyone before. You're born in Florence, but orphaned almost immediately. Smallpox takes your mother, infection your father. You're an infant, barely aware of the world, already stripped of safety and inherited into chaos. Your Medici relatives, Powerful, ruthless, and utterly saturated in their own prestige, pass you around like fine china. Too precious to drop, too valuable to leave in the cupboard. They send you to a convent which, in the 16th century, is where all the inconvenient girls go. You learn to read Latin, French, Italian. You learn to pray, to fast, to survive on silence and fear. But you also learn how to listen, how to read faces, how to plot in the spaces between prayers. The nuns think you're meek, but you're just patient. At 14, you're called to court. The Medici name still means something, and Pope Clement VII, your cousin, is determined to turn that something into a throne. You're betrothed to Henry, the second son of King Francis I of France. Not the heir, just the spare, but still a French prince. The deal is sealed with so many blessings and papal signatures, it might as well have been carved into stone. When you meet Henry, he's polite but distant. His eyes slide past you, already fixed on someone else. His mistress, Diane de Poitiers, 20 years older than him, sharp, poised, and unfortunately, permanent. From the first day of your marriage, you know exactly where you stand. Beside him. Not with him. The French court watches you with a kind of smug curiosity. You're Italian, a banker's daughter. You don't come with a dowry of land, but of coin, and even that, they whisper, might not be enough. They call you the little shopkeeper. They mock your clothes, your accent, your dark eyes. Your inbred blood is too Italian, too strange, too dangerous. But you bide your time. You give Henry heirs, eventually. It takes 10 years of humiliating barrenness, countless fertility treatments involving herbs, prayers, and some truly uncomfortable animal parts. But you finally do it. Not one heir, 10 children, 10. You bear them like you're building a kingdom from your own ribs. Your womb becomes your weapon, and your pain becomes the mortar that holds your place at court. Here's your historical fact. Catherine de' Medici was Queen of France through her marriage to Henry II. After his death, she became the regent for 3 of her sons, Francis II, Charles IX, and Henry III, each of whom ruled France during one of its most volatile and violent eras. She was deeply involved in court politics and religious conflicts, especially during the French Wars of Religion, and has often been cast, fairly or not, as a schemer, a poisoner, and a woman behind every shadow. Now for the weird. Catherine was obsessed with astrology. She kept a team of astrologers on staff, including Nostradamus himself, and refused to make major decisions without consulting the stars. She also maintained a collection of mummified animals and supposedly had a personal apothecary who concocted poisons in her cellar, just in case diplomacy failed. The open debate? Catherine's legacy is torn in two. Was she a Machiavellian monster who orchestrated the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre and poisoned her enemies? Or was she a mother desperately trying to hold a collapsing kingdom together with nothing but cleverness and fear? Historians still argue. But the truth likely lies somewhere in between. You outlive your husband, his mistress, and half your children. The kingdom you help rule is on fire, literally and politically. Catholics and Protestants tear each other apart in the streets. Your sons are too young, too weak, or too erratic to hold the line. So you do it. You negotiate, threaten, bribe, blackmail, and bend. You wear black from the moment Henry dies and never take it off. You say it's for mourning, but everyone knows it's for power. You become the Queen Mother, the dark tower at the centre of the storm. You watch your daughters married off like peace offerings, one to Spain, one to Navarre, another to Lorraine, all cousins, all part of the same desperate cycle of genetic patchwork and political hope. You've buried 4 of them by the time you reach 60. The others are pale, nervous, childless, or dangerously fertile, depending on which strand of the family won the inheritance that week. Your sons are worse. Francis dies young. Charles sees ghosts. Henry turns to celibate mysticism and murder. You wonder what you passed down. Was it the Medici ruthlessness? The Bourbon fragility? Or just the toll of generations too proud to marry outside the family and too foolish to admit it? You grow old but never weak. Your spine stays straight. Your eyes stay sharp. You keep your enemies close, your astrologers closer, and your poisons closest. You walk the palace halls like a ghost queen, half feared, half worshipped. Children are told not to look you directly in the eye. When death comes, it doesn't frighten you. You've been dying in pieces for decades, every child lost, every war waged, every betrayal endured. You die in bed, surrounded by symbols, a rosary, a royal seal, a vial of perfume strong enough to mask the rot beneath your fingernails. They bury you in royal grandeur, but not in peace. France will crumble further after you're gone. Your children will die one by one. Your name will become a warning. Your portrait, a whisper of power hidden behind a widow's veil. But you ruled, when no one else could, or would, or dared. You made queens from your daughters. You forged kings from weak boys. And even if the bloodlines collapse behind you, you walked the edge of history like a tightrope, poised, precise, and never looking down. You are born into disaster, a cradle set in motion by murder, betrayal, and a crown that gleams like it's already cursed. You are Mary, Queen of Scots, the baby queen, 8 days old when your father dies. And just like that, you become sovereign of a nation so riddled with violence it practically groans under your tiny feet. You don't yet know how many people are going to die because of your blood. You don't know how many parts of yourself you'll lose trying to keep what's left of your crown. The court gathers around you like anxious wolves in velvet. The problem isn't your lineage. It's perfect, terrifyingly so. You're a Stuart by your father, a Tudor by your grandmother, a Guise by your mother. You're French, you're Scottish, you're Catholic, you're royalty wrapped in Catholic silk at a time when Protestant flames are licking at the doors. And your gene pool? It's an aristocratic swamp. Your mother, Mary of Guise, married your father, James V of Scotland, not just for alliance, but because it kept the royal blood neatly in the family. You are everything and everyone all at once, and none of it is safe. By the time you're 5, they've already decided to ship you off. France wants you, badly. You're betrothed to the French Dauphin, Francis. He's small, pale, and plagued with so many health issues you wonder if God built him out of dust and second chances. But he's a prince, a Valois, another child marinated in centuries of cousin marriages and political matchmaking. The French call it continuity. You'll learn to call it rot. You grow up in the glittering court of Catherine de' Medici, raised on etiquette, flattery, and fear. The French girls whisper about your height. You're tall, like your Guise ancestors. You're graceful, fluent in 6 languages by 13, and frighteningly self-possessed. The Queen Mother watches you with unreadable eyes. She sees the threat in you, not just as her son's bride, but as a potential rival, because Catherine knows what you are, a fertile young queen with a claim to England's throne, and the kind of blood that invites conspiracies like moths to a candle. You marry Francis at 15. He's frail, kind, a little timid. You try to love him. You try even harder to ignore his wheezing, the tremble in his fingers, the persistent whispers from his physicians about inherited weaknesses. You both know it won't last, and it doesn't. A year into the marriage, he dies. A middle ear infection becomes something more, something lethal. You're 16, a widow, again a queen without a king. France sends you home, just like that, back to Scotland. A colder, harsher place where your accent is strange and your faith is dangerous. The nobles look at you like you're made of fire and foreignness. They remember the years under your mother's regency, her French advisors, her Catholic piety, and they do not forgive. You return with nothing but your name, your education, and the weight of every dead royal who came before you. You try. God, you try. You marry again. Lord Darnley, another cousin. Of course, he's handsome, arrogant, and stupid in all the ways that make kings dangerous. He drinks. He flaunts his affairs. He wants the crown matrimonial, and when you hesitate, he turns cruel. You're pregnant with his child when he's murdered. The house he's staying in explodes, and they find him strangled in the garden. It doesn't take a detective to figure out someone wanted him dead, and didn't care how messy it got. Your third marriage is a scandal. James Hepburn, Earl of Bothwell, your supposed protector, your maybe rapist, you're definitely not approved by anyone's suitor. Some say you married him out of love. Others say you were kidnapped. You say nothing. By then, you're too exhausted to correct the narrative. Scotland revolts. You're imprisoned. Your baby son, James, is taken from you and crowned without your blessing. Here's your historical fact. Mary, Queen of Scots, was the great-granddaughter of Henry VII of England. Her claim to the English throne made her a constant threat to Elizabeth I. After being deposed in Scotland, Mary fled to England seeking refuge, but was instead held under house arrest for 19 years and ultimately executed. Her life was a series of brutal turns, many of them catalysed by a noble lineage so pure it was poisonous. Now for the weird, Mary travelled with an entourage of women known as the Four Marys, all named Mary, all loyal, all noble-born. It sounds like a legend, but it's true. Their presence was symbolic, foreshadows following a queen who could trust no one else. Some claimed they even performed rituals to protect her from the evil eye. Others said they were spies planted by the Guise family, possibly both. The debate: was Mary a political victim or a dangerously naive ruler? Historians are split. Some paint her as a tragic heroine, undone by circumstance and men. Others say she made catastrophic choices driven by emotion and ego. One thing is certain: her downfall was seeded in her blood long before her enemies raised a blade. You spend nearly 2 decades locked in various castles and estates in England, watched, interrogated, slowly erased. You embroider, you read, you write letters in cipher, you pray, you wait. Always waiting. For a rescue, for a trial, for your son to remember your name, for someone to treat you like more than a ticking time bomb in a velvet gown. And then one day, they stop waiting too. Elizabeth signs the warrant. You're to be executed. Not as a queen, but as a traitor. They give you a black dress. You request red, the colour of martyrdom. You walk to the scaffold with the grace of someone who's been practising her whole life. You forgive your executioner. You kneel. You place your head on the block. The first blow is clumsy. The second nearly finishes it. The third takes it off. Your lips are still moving for several seconds after your head lands in the basket. The onlookers gasp. The story becomes legend. Your body is buried far from where your crown once sat. Your son will become king of both Scotland and England, uniting the thrones that tore you apart. Your blood will continue, trickling into monarchs who still bear your nose, your height, your deep, quiet fury. But your name, your legend, becomes something else, something whispered and feared, because you weren't just a queen. You were the culmination of too much power in one body, too much beauty, too much ancestry. You were born to break, and they made sure you did. You're born in a palace swaddled in silk and politics to the sound of cannon fire celebrating your birth. Not because you're a girl, no one celebrates that, but because you're a future bride. You are Anne of Austria, Infanta of Spain, Archduchess of Austria, and eventually Queen of France. But before that, before the crowns and the scandals and the aching weight of the throne, you are a girl whose family tree looks less like a tree and more like a pretzel. A very fancy, extremely Catholic pretzel. Your mother is Margaret of Austria, your father is Philip III of Spain, and your husband, wait for it, is your own uncle, Louis XIII of France. Yes, that uncle. It's not a scandal, it's policy. Royal blood must remain royal, and what better way to ensure that than marrying within the family again and again until your chromosomes start sending smoke signals for help. As a child, you're told you're special, chosen, sacred. The Habsburg jaw already shows itself in your profile, sharp and proud. You're quiet, observant, and intensely pious. You memorize your prayers before your alphabets. Your days are filled with Latin, dance lessons, and being reminded that your body doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the alliance. Spain and France, joined not by love, but by flesh. At 14, you're packed into a carriage, escorted by a fleet of nobles, and sent across the Pyrenees into France. You don't speak French yet. You don't know your husband. You don't even know how to kiss without 3 layers of fabric and 2 chaperones in the room. But you are a queen now. So you smile, you bow, and you say, oui, even when you don't understand the question. Louis XIII is distant. That's the polite version. He's cold, disinterested, more devoted to his male courtiers than to you. Some say he's shy, others say he's indifferent, but you're 15, confused, and completely alone in a glittering court that looks down on your Spanish manners, your Spanish gowns, and your Spanish accent. The court mocks you behind your back, too stiff, too dull, too foreign. You cry only at night, alone, kneeling before a crucifix with blistered knees and whispered Latin. You are married for 23 years before you conceive a child. Let that sink in. More than 2 decades of failed pregnancies, miscarriages, awkward silences at court, veiled glances from your ladies, Prayers whispered a little more urgently every month. Every failed pregnancy is an unspoken accusation. Every moment without a child is political instability. Here's your historical fact. Anne of Austria and Louis XIII were married in 1615. Their marriage was marked by long periods of estrangement and repeated failures to produce an heir. Anne suffered multiple miscarriages and was even accused of using Spanish sorcery to remain childless. It wasn't until 1638, 23 years after their wedding, that she finally gave birth to Louis XIV, the future Sun King. Now for the fringe fact. During her childless years, Anne kept a miraculous wax doll hidden in her private chapel, supposedly gifted by a nun from her convent in Spain. The doll was bathed, dressed, and even laid in a cradle during feast days in hopes that the Virgin Mary would send a real child. Whether this was faith or desperation or both is anyone's guess. And the debate. Was the marriage truly never consummated until late in life, or was the problem biological? Louis's sexual identity has long been a topic of speculation among historians, but many agree that political and religious tensions created a pressure cooker around the royal bedchamber. Some letters suggest the couple simply didn't like each other. Others hint that Louis was incapable or unwilling. And then there's the darker theory, that repeated inbreeding on both sides left them genetically incompatible. When your son is finally born, miraculously, almost suspiciously, he is immediately named Louis Dieudonné, Louis, the God-given. People whisper it was a miracle. Others whisper it was someone else's child. Either way, you have secured your place at last. But the price was everything else. You age quickly. Too many years of fasting, sorrow, and prayers that went unanswered until your body was too worn down to enjoy the victory. Your hair greys early. You develop tremors in your hands. Your back aches so badly you can no longer kneel without assistance. But you smile tightly and sit beside your now-grown son, who shines brighter than the sun and never forgets that he almost didn't exist. After Louis XIII dies, you become regent for your son. Finally, you wield real power, not through a husband, but through your own name. You rule alongside Cardinal Mazarin, whose relationship with you becomes the subject of endless gossip. Some say he was your lover. Others say he ruled through you. You say nothing, because you've learned how to wear silence like armour. You defend your son's throne through the Fronde, a series of rebellions led by nobles who think a child cannot rule. You crush them, politely, firmly, with a smile that doesn't reach your eyes. You remind the court that while France may have doubted you, you never doubted God or your bloodline. But your body, it remembers everything. The miscarriages, the ridicule, the long cold years of being a wife without a husband, a queen without a child. You grow heavier, slower. Your skin dulls, your joints swell. You retreat into prayer, into ritual, into the quiet comfort of repetition. You're still devout, still dressed in widow's black, still reminding everyone just by breathing that you endured. You die at 64, in a palace thick with incense and veiled paintings, surrounded by nobles who now call you mother of the greatest king France has ever seen. But they forget so quickly how you suffered, how you were blamed for infertility, how you prayed yourself raw, how you carried the Habsburg legacy in your body and nearly shattered under it. Your son builds Versailles. He dances as the Sun King, but your portrait hangs in the quiet corners, a reminder that before all the glory there was you, a queen who married her uncle, waited decades for a child and still held a kingdom together while her body betrayed her. You're not remembered for your mind, not really, not for your will or your endurance or your quiet savagery, but you should be, because you survived. Your jaw doesn't open properly, not wide anyway, not without pain. When you yawn, there's a click, and sometimes a dull throb that reaches up into your temples. The palace physician tells you to chew slowly and avoid hard bread. Your nurse shrugs and mutters something about the Habsburgs under her breath. You're too young to understand what that means yet, but your mirror will explain it to you soon enough. You are Maria Anna of Spain, born in 1606, the daughter of Philip III of Spain and Margaret of Austria, herself a double Habsburg. The blood in your veins is so concentrated it could be used to preserve saints. You're the physical embodiment of dynastic pride and its consequences. Your eyes are dark, serious. Your mouth is small, almost cramped by a chin that's beginning to jut forward. And when you smile, it's careful. You've already learned not to show too many teeth. You're one of 8 children, 4 of your siblings won't survive infancy. Another dies in early adolescence. But this isn't shocking. Not in your world. In the Habsburg household, mortality is more of a schedule than an event. The palace chaplains are always on hand. Your parents weep less with each loss. After all, what else can you do when you keep trying to fold the same deck of cards over and over again? No. By the time you're 10, you've developed a kind of graceful stillness. Less from discipline, more from fatigue. Your back aches if you sit too long. Your gums bleed when you eat anything with pepper. You're not allowed to run, you're too important to fall. Your hair is brushed until your scalp stings, then tied with ribbons and pearls like a doll on a shelf. Your job is to be perfect. Your destiny is to marry your cousin. And you do. Of course you do. At 23, you marry Ferdinand III, Holy Roman Emperor. He's your first cousin on your mother's side and your uncle on your father's. Take a second to wrap your brain around that. Your family tree is a circle, a wreath of repetition. You've met Ferdinand before, during formal visits to court, when he was just a tall boy with quiet hands and your same heavy brow. Now, he's your husband. The match is celebrated as a triumph of Catholic unity. You say your vows in Latin, wear a dress so heavy it bruises your hips, and sit beside him at banquets with a smile that never quite reaches your eyes. The first years of marriage are formal, stiff and thick with ritual. Ferdinand is kind but distant. He respects you. Which in your world is about as romantic as things get. You do your duty. You produce children. 9 pregnancies, 6 children who live past infancy. You bleed more than you should. Your ankles swell. Your face grows thinner while your jaw grows heavier. In portraits, artists smooth your features, soften the Habsburg chin until it barely resembles you. In private, your daughters inherit the same face. Here's your historical fact. Maria Anna of Spain married Ferdinand III, and together they produced several children, including future emperors and queens. She was active in court life, often advising her husband on political and religious matters. She maintained her Spanish customs, including her entourage and household structure, within the Austrian court, creating a cultural bridge, and sometimes a wall between the two empires. Fringe fact. Maria Anna brought with her a full team of Spanish confessors and spiritual advisors, some of whom were so influential they caused friction with Ferdinand's own court. There were rumours that she practised secret fasts, flagellation, and wore a hair shirt beneath her silk gowns to atone for the sins of her bloodline. Whether this was out of genuine devotional guilt is still debated. And that's the scholarly divide. Was Maria Anna a deeply devout woman acting as a moral compass in the Habsburg court, or a quietly ambitious queen using religion to solidify her influence over Ferdinand? Letters from her chamber suggest she was both, a woman trying to navigate power in a world that expected her to produce children and little else. You spend much of your life pregnant or in mourning, sometimes both. You outlive 3 of your children. You attend funerals in layers of lace so black they swallow the candlelight. You retreat more and more into prayer, not because you expect answers, those stopped coming after the 3rd miscarriage, but because it keeps your hands busy. As queen, you are a master of silence. You know when not to speak, which is most of the time. But in private chambers, you whisper advice to Ferdinand. You influence appointments. You support Catholic factions against the creeping tide of Protestantism. Your enemies accuse you of meddling. Your allies praise your devout counsel. You learn that the difference between a saint and a schemer is usually just who's telling the story. Your health declines steadily. Your jaw stiffens more each year. Your hands begin to tremble. You develop a cough that rattles through winter and stays long after the snow has melted. The physicians try their usual tricks: leeches, tonics, bleeding. You try prayer and silence. When you die, you're just 39. The official cause is listed as complications following childbirth, which is a courtly way of saying your body finally gave out. A lifetime of dynastic pressure, constant pregnancies, and inbreeding-induced fragility wrapped in the appearance of divine purpose. They bury you with pomp and incense. They lay you in a marble tomb beside your lost children. A golden plaque names you Queen, Empress, Mother of Europe. But it doesn't say how you stopped smiling around the age of 17, how you held your jaw just slightly tilted to avoid the pain, how your portraits were airbrushed with brush and prayer, how you gave everything the Habsburgs ever asked and were still buried before 40. Your children carry your legacy. Your son becomes emperor. Your daughter marries another cousin. The jawline survives, a little sharper with each generation. the bloodline endures. But no one remembers how you flinched when you bit into an apple, or how you always kept one hand hidden beneath your veil, shaking softly. You are Mariana of Austria, and you are your own niece. Just sit with that for a moment. Your father is Ferdinand III, Holy Roman Emperor. Your mother is Maria Anna of Spain, his niece, which makes her your mother, yes, but also your cousin, which makes your bloodline a spiral staircase going nowhere. You're a double Habsburg with the jaw to prove it. Even your baby portraits show it. Chin pronounced, lips thin, face framed by curls that do nothing to soften the bone underneath. You grow up in the great cold palaces of Vienna, wrapped in ermine and ceremony. Servants avoid your eyes. Courtiers bow just a little too low. They don't see a girl. They see inheritance. You're being groomed, not raised. Trained to sit still for hours, to sign your name with 7 titles attached, to marry not for love or even alliance, but for damage control. You're the answer to a bloodline crisis, whether you want to be or not. By 13, the paperwork begins. They've chosen your husband. It's Philip IV of Spain, your mother's brother, your uncle. He's 44. You're still learning embroidery stitches. You ask why. No one answers. Or rather, they answer with silence and velvet gowns and lectures about duty and God and Habsburg honour. The ambassador assures you that marrying Philip will keep the blood pure. You want to ask, pure what exactly? You marry him at 14. You become Queen of Spain the moment you arrive. They greet you with parades and sermons, bells that ring for hours. But behind the incense and applause is a quiet unease. The Spanish court knows how fragile the dynasty has become. It's in your hips, your jaw, your bone-deep weariness. You're not just Philip's wife. You're his last hope. He's tired, old. His first wife, your aunt, died years ago after bearing 12 children, most of whom didn't survive infancy. His only surviving son, Balthazar Charles, died as a teenager. Now he's depending on you, a girl barely old enough to bleed, to produce a healthy heir and preserve the Spanish Empire. The irony is almost too perfect. He touches you like he's reading a book he's already memorized. Loveless, clinical, perfunctory. Your marriage is a function, not a relationship, and you play your part, you kneel, you pray, you say nothing. You learn the customs of the Spanish court, which are somehow even more suffocating than Vienna. No one moves without permission. You're expected to sleep in a separate room and only see your husband when summoned. You cry, silently. But even that is considered indulgent. Here's your historical fact. Mariana of Austria married Philip IV of Spain in 1649 as a means of maintaining the Habsburg line. She was both his niece and second wife. Together they had 5 children, but only one son, Charles, survived. Charles II of Spain, perhaps the most notoriously inbred monarch in European history. Now for the strange, Mariana became regent of Spain after Philip's death, ruling on behalf of her son. But her court was rumoured to be a spiritual battleground. She surrounded herself with confessors, mystics, and so-called holy women who claimed visions and divine insight. She believed heavily in omens. A comet seen in 1664 reportedly sent her into fasting and sleeplessness for weeks. And the scholarly debate: did Mariana knowingly contribute to the genetic collapse of the Habsburg line by agreeing to marry her uncle? Or was she simply a product of a system that valued blood purity over biological sanity? Letters suggest she understood the political necessity, but also feared what her womb might produce. Her pregnancy with Charles was difficult, drawn out, and nearly fatal. And when he was born, sickly, deformed, barely able to suckle, she must have known what she'd done. Charles is your only surviving child. He is pale, limp, unable to walk without help, and cannot speak clearly until nearly 4 years old. His tongue is too large for his mouth, his head too big for his neck, his spine curves like a question mark. The court calls him El Hechizado, the bewitched. You say nothing. You dress him in gold and lace. You carry him to mass. You pretend that everything is fine, because to do otherwise is treason. You become regent the moment Philip dies. You are 31. Queen Mother, Queen Dowager, and queen in every way that matters. But your power is constantly questioned. Male advisors circle like vultures, whispering about your hysteria, your weak constitution, your foreign ways. You hold your ground. You summon strength you didn't know you had. You fight off coups, negotiate alliances, and keep Spain afloat through plague, famine, and economic ruin. all while nursing a child who screams when touched too suddenly. You fast so often your teeth loosen from your gums. You wake every hour of the night to pray. You ask your confessor whether you're being punished. He assures you suffering is holy. You nod and continue to suffer. You keep Charles alive. That is your penance and your mission, and you begin to suspect they are the same thing. You age rapidly. At 35, you look 50. Your skin grows sallow. Your joints swell. Your hands tremble when you sign decrees. But still, you rule. You teach Charles how to speak in complete sentences, how to nod when he doesn't understand, how to sit for portraits that will lie about his condition. You watch him struggle, and you lie to yourself too. And the whispers continue that Charles cannot father children, that the line will end with him, that this you was the final link in the chain of inbreeding that snapped under its own weight. You hear them. You do not disagree. You die at 60, a shadow of the girl who left Vienna, whose marriage was meant to hold an empire together. Spain will soon collapse into the War of Spanish Succession. The crown will pass to outsiders. The Habsburgs in Spain will end with Charles. But your name will be remembered, not for beauty or power, not even for tragedy. You will be remembered as the woman who married her uncle, gave birth to the last gasp of a dynasty, and ruled through faith, bone pain, and silence. And in every portrait, every oil painting touched up by trembling court artists, you are still, pale, stiff-jawed, unsmiling, as if your body always knew it was already halfway to ruin. You don't cry when you're born, not loudly anyway, just a small uncertain whimper. The midwife hesitates, not sure if that's good enough. They poke and prod and wrap you in silk anyway, because you're royal. Fragile, but royal. You're Maria Antonia of Austria, born in 1669 in Vienna, and before you can even hold your head up, they've already written your future in ink and gold. You're going to marry your cousin, and you're going to save the dynasty. Your mother is Mariana of Austria. Yes, that Mariana. The one who married her uncle and gave birth to the famously cursed Charles II of Spain. That makes Charles your half-brother and your first cousin. Or maybe your double cousin. Honestly, it's hard to keep track. The Habsburgs stopped pretending to care about genetic diversity sometime back in the 1400s. What matters is that you're a vessel now, a carefully bred bottle of royal blood, shipped across borders to produce an heir that can fix what's broken. You grow up in the Hofburg Palace, surrounded by silence. People speak in hushed tones when they pass you. They eye your jawline, your posture, your ability to walk without assistance. You can, thankfully. Your limbs are straight, your teeth come in relatively aligned, and you don't drool when you talk. The bar is low. You meet it. They call you healthy. Praise be. But there's a pressure that follows you like a shadow. Everyone knows what you're meant for. Spain. Not just as a queen, but as a saviour. The Spanish crown is crumbling under the weight of Charles II, your mother's son, your future husband, your relative by every blood route imaginable. He's sickly. He's sterile, probably. He's haunted, literally. The court says he's bewitched, that devils plague him. But everyone knows what it really is. Inbreeding. Unstoppable. Inevitable. And you're supposed to be the patch. They marry you off at 20. You sail to Spain just like your mother did. The ceremony is heavy with expectation. The streets of Madrid are lined with banners. Priests chant blessings. Charles stands beside you at the altar, slack-jawed, blinking too often, hands trembling. You try not to look at him for too long. You focus on your vows. You promise to obey, to bear children, to carry the bloodline forward. Everyone holds their breath. The honeymoon is awkward. Charles doesn't speak much. When he does, it's often nonsense. Muttered Latin phrases, paranoid fears about poisoning, spells, betrayal. You try to comfort him. He flinches when touched. You weep silently into your pillow at night, the enormous bed a vast, silent expanse between you. Here's your historical fact. Maria Antonia of Austria married Charles II of Spain in 1685. She was his niece on his mother's side and his cousin on his father's. Their marriage was politically vital, a last-ditch effort to save the Habsburg line in Spain. But they had no children. None survived, and possibly none were ever even conceived. Now the oddity. Maria Antonia brought with her a small menagerie of exotic pets. Parrots, a monkey, even a miniature deer. They were gifts from the Austrian court, meant to cheer her and perhaps distract her from the political and emotional vacuum she was entering. For a while, they were the only companions in the palace she could truly trust. And the scholarly debate: was Maria Antonia ever truly capable of bearing children, or was the fault entirely on Charles? Some historians argue that she may have had one or two early miscarriages that went unrecorded or were deliberately hidden from public knowledge to protect the image of fertility. Others believe the union was biologically doomed from the start. Either way, the failure to produce an heir was seen as hers, not his. You try everything. Herbal tonics, fertility rituals, intense prayer. You make pilgrimages to local shrines. You take on a confessor so strict he makes you confess twice a day. Nothing changes, the court whispers. The pressure mounts. Charles grows more unstable, jealous, fearful, sleepless. He accuses your ladies-in-waiting of witchcraft. He accuses you of witchcraft. You're 22 and being watched by spies in your own bedroom. Your body begins to betray you. A persistent cough, pain in your stomach, a creeping, unexplained exhaustion that no amount of sleep can cure. The court physicians diagnose vapours. Others suspect a slow poisoning. Maybe arsenic, maybe mercury, maybe the sheer weight of expectation finally eating you from the inside out. You waste away in plain sight. Your gowns hang loose. Your face grows pale. You're carried from room to room by servants, too weak to walk. You smile through it all, because that's what queens do. You sip broth. You nod politely. You press your hands over your belly as if you can will life into being. But you're dying. Everyone knows it. The priests are summoned more frequently. The court prepares for another funeral. You're 23 when you finally collapse for good. They say it's cancer, or tuberculosis, or spiritual fatigue. But you know better. You died trying to fix something that couldn't be fixed. Your body is buried with royal ceremony, laid in a tomb so ornate it seems to mock the quiet life you lived. Charles weeps, or tries to. His face contorts, his hands tremble. But his grief feels like performance, or habit. He was never truly present, not in your marriage, not in your decline. You suspect he already forgot what your voice sounded like. You're remembered briefly, then forgotten. Overshadowed by your mother, your husband, and the grand catastrophe of the Spanish Habsburgs' final hour. You leave no children, no legacy, just a few portraits in oil paint, where you sit stiffly on golden chairs, chin slightly tilted, eyes half-lidded from exhaustion or disinterest, or simply knowing the truth. Because you did know the truth. You weren't sent to be a queen. You were sent to be a bandage, and you tore. You are Maria Louisa of Orleans, and you wake each day wondering what, exactly, you did to deserve this. This palace, this crown, this slow erosion of your body and spirit. You were born in 1662, daughter of Philippe I, Duke of Orleans, brother to Louis XIV. That makes the Sun King your uncle. Your mother is Henrietta of England, daughter of Charles I, making your family line not only French but English, and thick with cousins. The sort of pedigree that makes matchmakers salivate and physicians wince. You grow up in Saint-Cloud, surrounded by roses and restraint. Your father dresses like a peacock and spends more time with his favourites than with his wives. Your mother withers under court scrutiny, dies mysteriously. Some say poison, some say heartbreak. You're left behind, quiet and clever, with too much royal blood and too few options. They choose Spain for you. At 17, you're told you will marry Charles II of Spain. Yes, him, that Charles. The one known throughout Europe as the Habsburg wreck, the end of the line, the prince whose very name makes midwives cross themselves. You've heard the stories, the drooling, the stuttering, the limp, the tongue too large for speech, the jaw too pronounced for function. You think it's all exaggerated, court gossip maybe. Surely they wouldn't send you, to such a man. But when you arrive in Madrid, it's worse than the rumours. He's sweet, in his way, shy, gentle, but sickly. And not just physically. There's something behind his eyes, a flicker of confusion, like the world is always moving slightly faster than he is. You try not to recoil when he kisses your hand. His breath smells of decay. His hands tremble even when holding a spoon. Your stomach sinks into your shoes. The wedding is a parade of hollow spectacle, gold embroidery, Latin vows, church bells that echo like warning shots. You wear white silk and pearls and smile so hard your jaw cramps. The Spanish court looks at you with hope, but also with desperation. You're not a bride. You're a lifeboat. And immediately the pressure begins. Every month without a pregnancy is counted against you. Every bite you don't eat is whispered about. Every time you faint in church, someone rushes to record the date, hoping it means something is happening in your womb. You're 17, then 18, then 19, and still childless. Here's your historical fact. Maria Louisa of Orleans was the first wife of Charles II of Spain. She married him in 1679 and was queen consort until her early death in 1689. Despite constant pressure and a decade of trying, she never bore children. Their marriage was affectionate, but her health deteriorated rapidly under the pressure of producing an heir. Now the strange. Maria Louisa reportedly developed a craving for chocolate, which she drank obsessively. So obsessively, in fact, that rumours swirled around the Spanish court that her fondness for the drink was harming her fertility. Physicians and priests alike debated whether her indulgence was sinful or simply foolish. Some even claimed the chocolate was being poisoned. And the debate: was Maria Louisa infertile, or was Charles II simply incapable? Most modern historians point to Charles's severe inbreeding, his parents were uncle and niece, as the cause of his infertility. He fathered no children with either of his wives, but in Maria Louisa's time, all blame fell on her. Her thinness, her nerves, her unnatural appetite for chocolate and solitude. These were the explanations people clung to because they couldn't bear to say the truth, that their king, their bloodline, was already broken. You try everything. Pilgrimages, holy relics, special diets. There's a ritual involving a Virgin Mary statue and 12 midnight rosaries. Nothing works. The court physicians prescribe bizarre treatments, ointments, fumigations, even something involving goat's milk and powdered coral. Your skin breaks out, your hands shake, you grow dizzy, withdrawn. You stop leaving your chambers for days at a time. Charles dotes on you. In his own limited way, he cares. He brings you flowers, tries to hold your hand, sits beside you for hours in awkward silence, then asks if he's made you ill by breathing too near. You want to tell him it's not his fault, but of course it is. By 22, you're already withering. Your hair dulls, your eyes lose their shine, food turns to ash in your mouth, you develop fevers that come and go, your weight drops, you tremble constantly. The courtiers whisper poison, again, or witchcraft, or divine punishment. One priest claims the French court sent you cursed gloves, another blames your English grandmother's Protestant blood. You're 26 when the coughing starts in earnest. It rattles your ribs, you sleep sitting up, you cough blood into your handkerchief and hide it in your pillow. You faint in front of the Virgin statue and wake with priests pressing relics to your chest. Charles weeps. He says he can't go on without you. He's right. You die at 26, weighing barely 80 pounds, lungs full of fluid, body worn out not from illness alone, but from constant hope, constant failure. You're laid out in white and gold. Charles is inconsolable. He orders months of mourning. He refuses to see other women for years, but eventually he remarries. The pressure doesn't stop. And you become a footnote. The French princess who couldn't save the line. The wife who didn't give Spain an heir. They blame your nerves, your thinness, your chocolate. They never blame the man who was never built to rule, or the dynasty that had been eating itself from the inside out for generations. There is one portrait that survives. Your face pale, eyes slightly downcast, lips thin and unsmiling. The painter was kind to your features, softening the sharpness, brushing away the sickness that clung to you like shadow. But still you can see it there, the exhaustion, the defeat, the quiet understanding that no amount of royal blood could change what your body already knew. You didn't fail Spain. Spain failed you. You arrive in Spain like a storm no one saw coming. German-born, Italian-schooled, raised in a court of strategy and silk, you are Maria Anna of Neuburg, and they choose you not for your charm or dowry, but for your fertility. That's it. That's the whole pitch. They've read your family file like a medical report. Your sisters have borne dozens of children. Your mother never missed a cycle. And your blood, while not particularly blue, is considered fresh enough to restart a dead dynasty. You are 23, the job posting second wife to Charles II of Spain. The previous queen is dead, so is everyone's hope. You've heard the rumours. Of course you have. You've seen the tapestries get pulled aside when his name is mentioned. You've seen paintings of Charles that feel more like warnings than portraits. And yet, you say yes. Not because you're naive, but because you've been told this is your sacred duty. Europe's most powerful house is flickering, and someone has to climb into the fire. Might as well be you. From the first step on Spanish soil, you realise how bad it really is. The palace smells of incense and illness. The walls are covered in damp velvet, heavy crucifixes, and silence. Everyone watches you, not with curiosity, but with desperation. They need an heir. They need you to give them one, immediately. And then there's Charles, 38, but with the body of an old man, the mind of a child, and the soul of someone who already knows he's damned. His head jerks when he speaks. His tongue still doesn't quite fit in his mouth. His knees buckle when he walks. He's friendly in the way ghosts are, present but detached. When you're introduced, he weeps. You smile. It's easier than screaming. The wedding is grim. No joy. No dancing, just obligation. You wear a crown that digs into your scalp and say vows that feel like apologies. Charles tries. He does. He gives you gifts. A rosary carved from bones. A portrait of you that he commissioned before meeting you. He watches you eat with the silent awe of someone watching a star burn out. And the worst part, you don't get pregnant. You try. God, you try. You schedule your life around your fertility calendar. You pray. You submit to endless humiliating examinations. You drink broths made from deer marrow and crushed pearls. You carry relics in your undergarments. The court physicians whisper about your cold womb. Charles prays in his chapel until his knees bleed. Nothing happens. Here's your historical fact. Maria Anna of Neuburg became Queen of Spain in 1690 and served as Charles II's second wife until his death in 1700. Though chosen for her family's remarkable fertility, she had no children with Charles. His sterility, a product of intense Habsburg inbreeding, was widely speculated but never officially admitted. Maria Anna was politically active during and after Charles's reign, becoming a key player in the events that sparked the War of Spanish Succession. Fringe fact. Maria Anna kept a personal collection of apotropaic charms, protective talismans that included bits of saints' clothing, vials of holy water, and even a scrap of what was said to be the true cross, stitched into her bodices. She claimed they helped shield her womb from witchcraft. Whether it was superstition or strategy, she guarded them like state secrets, and the scholarly debate: was Maria Anna truly unable to conceive, or did she choose not to? Some historians suggest she quietly abandoned the idea after realizing Charles could barely function as a husband, let alone sire an heir. Others argue that the pressure and surveillance she endured was so suffocating that her body responded with functional infertility, a physical refusal to carry the burden that had destroyed so many before her. You begin to fight back, first politely, then viciously. You refuse to be blamed. You remind the court, loudly, that the king has fathered no children, not even illegitimate ones. You tell your ladies-in-waiting that the problem is his, not yours. You leak it to ambassadors. You let the rumours flourish. It works, for a while. You become politically powerful, aligning yourself with Austrian interests. You advise Charles. You vet appointments. You fill his chambers with people loyal to you. He trusts you more than anyone, partly because he has no choice, partly because you're the only one still treating him like a man. You begin to prepare for what happens after. Because Charles is dying. Everyone knows it. Even he knows it. By 1698, the vultures are circling. France and Austria both want the Spanish throne. You want to protect your faction and your dignity. You support an Austrian succession plan. Your enemies support the French. Charles, fragile as ever, is caught in the middle. And then, in 1700, it's over. Charles dies. Slowly, grotesquely. His autopsy, one of the most famous in history, reveals a body devastated by genetic decay. His heart is the size of a peppercorn. His intestines are gangrenous. He has no functioning reproductive organs. You mourn him publicly, but behind your veil you're already calculating. You are still queen. You still have influence. You can still win. But not for long. The French move quickly. The new king, Philip V, Louis XIV's grandson, enters Madrid with flair. Your allies are purged. Your letters are intercepted. Your chambers are emptied. You're asked, then ordered to leave court. You scream. You protest. You weep and demand to stay. They give you a carriage and a few trunks. They leave the palace gates open behind you like they're daring you to come back. You don't. You retreat to Toledo, then to Guadalajara. You write letters. You plead with Austrian nobles. You try to launch a comeback. Nothing sticks. Spain has moved on. You are the last queen of a dead dynasty, exiled by a future that no longer needs your body, your blood, or your prayers. You die in 1740, alone in a monastery, 40 years after Charles, long forgotten by the court that once cheered your arrival and then blamed you for the disaster they helped create. They remember you only as the foreign wife who couldn't save the king, not the one who ruled in his stead, not the one who resisted until the last crown fell. But in some ways, your legacy is sharper than theirs. You didn't break. You didn't wither. You didn't become another tragic portrait of Habsburg failure. You outlived it. And sometimes, survival is the most brutal triumph of all. You are Leopoldina of Austria, and from the moment you're born, they say you are the image of your namesake. A Habsburg on your mother's side, a Wittelsbach on your father's, and a walking reminder that European royalty is really just one big family reunion that forgot to end. You're born in 1797 in Vienna, into a world already on fire. Revolutions, invasions, and the creeping collapse of empires flicker outside the palace gates. But inside, it's still all brocade and bloodlines. You are the 8th daughter of Francis II, Holy Roman Emperor. 8th. That's the kind of number that makes people sigh and rearrange marriage maps. Your early life is quiet, studied, and laced with expectations no one says aloud. You are, by all accounts, sweet, refined, mild-mannered, and obedient. You love botany and poetry. You love animals. You paint. You pray. And as you grow into adolescence, your tutors note with cautious optimism that you appear free of the more alarming signs of dynastic decay. Your jaw is still a little Habsburg, but not too Habsburg. You speak clearly, without the slurred speech that haunted earlier generations. You have good posture, and most importantly, you're fertile by assumption. They don't know that, of course, but they hope. God, do they hope. You're a teenager when the offer comes. Brazil. The New World. The Portuguese royal family has fled there to escape Napoleon, and now they want a European bride for Pedro, the heir to the throne. Soon to be emperor of a new country, newly declared independent, they need someone with pedigree, someone with patience, someone pure. You fit the bill in every way. Your father, relieved to have yet another daughter off the chessboard, agrees. You're packed and shipped off to Rio de Janeiro, thousands of miles from Vienna, from the opera halls and etiquette drills and endless ceremonies. You're only 19. You arrive seasick, nervous, and unsure of everything. But Brazil is alive. The air is heavy with humidity and citrus. The birds are louder. The colours are brighter. The court is chaotic, improvised, still getting used to having a monarchy at all. You're meant to be the calm in the middle of the storm. Pedro is handsome, intense, half wild in a way that unnerves your handlers. He's not a Habsburg. He's freer, looser. He rides too fast. He speaks without thinking, but he's also kind in a distracted way. He takes your hand and calls you beautiful, and you believe him. For a time, you believe everything. You marry in 1817. You become Empress of Brazil. And for a moment, things are good. You write letters home saying the people are warm, the court is manageable, and your husband is, mostly, respectful. You bear your first child within the year. A daughter, healthy. Then a son, Pedro II. Then another daughter. The line is secure. The dynasty, at least here, is thriving. Here's your historical fact. Maria Leopoldina of Austria became the first Empress Consort of Brazil and played a key political role during its independence from Portugal. While Pedro I was away, she acted as regent and signed the Decree of Brazilian Independence in 1822. Her leadership was respected, even admired, in a country where royal women were expected to stay silent. Now for the odd, Leopoldina had a deep love of natural science, especially geology and botany. She brought scientists and naturalists with her to Brazil and filled the royal gardens with native plants and exotic specimens. She even kept live sloths and a personal collection of stones that she catalogued herself in several languages. Her apartments looked more like a museum than a royal suite. And the scholarly debate, was she politically brilliant or just well-advised? Some say Leopoldina was a driving force behind Pedro's decision to break with Portugal and form an independent empire, citing her letters, her diplomacy, and her subtle manipulations at court. Others argue she simply followed the lead of powerful Brazilian statesmen who used her as a figurehead. But one thing is clear, she was far more than a passive bride. But your marriage, it sours, quickly. Pedro begins taking mistresses. One in particular, Domitilla de Castro, becomes an open scandal. She's titled, flaunted, elevated, and worst of all, brought into your court. Pedro gives her a title, Marchioness of Santos. He moves her into a palace near yours. You are humiliated, heartbroken, still in your 20s, still bleeding from childbirths, still trying to hold the empire together, and now this. You write desperate letters home. You say you're lonely, that your health is failing, that your husband no longer speaks to you unless in public. You fall into a quiet depression, worsened by illness. There are miscarriages, pain that never fully leaves your bones. You hide it with grace, of course. You're a Habsburg. But the cracks begin to show. In 1826, your body finally gives in. After a traumatic miscarriage, your condition deteriorates. Fevers, infections, possibly uterine rupture. The physicians argue over causes, but the reality is clear. Your body has done all it can. It's over. You die at 30, pale and wasted. In a foreign land you came to rule and ended up surviving. Barely. Your funeral is lavish. Pedro weeps sincerely. He names the day of your death a national day of mourning. He publishes your last letters and commissions portraits of you in full regalia. But none of it fixes what was broken. You're remembered in Brazil as a founding mother, a quiet hero, the woman who stood firm when others ran, the woman who held the empire together while its future emperor chased lace and liquor. But back in Austria, they remember you as one more daughter married off, one more experiment in cross-continental dynastic engineering. You're buried in a chapel far from your birthplace, your bones cooled by tropical air and colonial guilt, and yet you mattered, you ruled, you loved Brazil, genuinely. You left behind a son who would grow up to be the country's most beloved emperor, and for a brief burning moment, you proved that even in the most tangled bloodline something new could grow. You are Maria Theresa of Austria-Este, and from your very first breath you exist in the long, exhausted shadow of a dynasty fraying at the edges. Born in 1773 to Ferdinand of Austria and Maria Beatrice d'Este, your blood is not just Habsburg. It's a meticulous blend of Italian aristocracy and centuries of intermarriage. Your parents are double first cousins naturally, because of course they are. Your family doesn't marry out. It loops, folds, and tightens, like a rope knotted so many times it no longer serves a purpose. Your face is fair. Your health is solid, for now. You're raised in a palace that smells of waxed marble and cold ambition. You're taught the usual: prayer, French, embroidery, music. But your real education is political. You're groomed for alliance, not curiosity. You're told often, almost soothingly, that your marriage will be a sacred bond for the glory of the family. No one tells you what it will feel like. By 16, you're promised to Victor Emmanuel I of Sardinia. He is your cousin, of course, like all decent candidates. A solid royal with eyes like stale wine and a jawline inherited straight from the same gene pool you both swim in. The ceremony is simple, quiet, because Europe is erupting. The French Revolution is burning across borders, and monarchies are toppling like dominoes. But you're still dressed in white, and silence and lace, and everyone pretends nothing has changed. You move to Sardinia, which sounds romantic and wild, but turns out to be cold stone halls and nervous glances. The court is formal, wary. You're foreign, Austrian, and they never let you forget it. But you play your role. You give birth, and then again, and again. In the end, you bear 10 children. 10. Your body becomes something between a miracle and a cautionary tale. The babies come in fast succession. Some live, some don't. Your hips ache constantly. Your legs swell. By 35, your joints grind when you walk. You ask your chaplain if this is holiness or punishment. He assures you it's God's plan. You almost believe him. Here's your historical fact. Maria Theresa of Austria-Este became Queen Consort of Sardinia in 1802. Her husband, Victor Emmanuel I, ruled during a period of deep political unrest. They had several children who later married into other European royal families, perpetuating the Habsburg legacy through interconnected lines stretching into Austria, Italy, France, and Bavaria. Fringe fact. Maria Theresa was deeply superstitious. She reportedly refused to enter certain rooms if the candles had been extinguished in the wrong order. She also kept a personal exorcist on retainer, not for herself, she claimed, but for unseen troubles that sometimes stirred in her nursery rooms. Whether that meant ghosts or guilt, no one dared to ask. And the debate. Was Maria Theresa a powerless pawn of dynastic politics, Or did she wield influence quietly from behind the curtain of motherhood? Some scholars argue that she had little political voice, overshadowed by her husband and the increasingly conservative Sardinian court. Others note that she was deeply involved in managing her daughters' marriages, aligning them with key houses to restore Habsburg power after Napoleon's fall. Her matchmaking may have been her sharpest political weapon. In 1802, your husband becomes king, you become queen. But the world doesn't stop shifting. Napoleon redraws maps like a bored god, and Sardinia is carved up, annexed, threatened. You flee the palace more than once. You pack your jewels in silence. You carry your children by hand. You pray during carriage rides that stretch on for days, your knuckles pale with terror. Back in Turin, the world settles, for a while. You age fast. Too many years of childbirth, war, exile, fear. Your once thick hair thins to a silver halo. You wear black more often, and not just for mourning. Your eyesight fails. Your breath shortens. Your hands curl with arthritis, but your mind remains razor sharp. You become a mother-in-law of nations. One daughter marries the Duke of Modena, another the Duke of Parma, a third marries into France. Each alliance is a web spun with trembling hands, and a prayer that maybe, just maybe, this generation won't bear the burden of broken blood. You watch revolutions rise again in 1821. Liberal uprisings shake your kingdom. Your husband abdicates the throne in panic, handing it to his brother. You retreat from power, not entirely by choice. You move into quiet palaces, your name now a memory tied to an unstable throne, and a dynasty grasping at relevance. You die in 1832 at 59, not young, not particularly old. You die in Genoa, surrounded by marble, crucifixes, and the heavy breathing of attendants who've been with you since your wedding day. You leave behind a trail of daughters, sons, nieces, and nephews, each bearing some fragment of your tired DNA. The court gives you full honours. Bells toll, priests chant, portraits are draped in velvet. And yet, there is something muted about the grief. Your era is already fading. The new world is louder, freer, crueler. And your legacy? It becomes one more stitch in the great unravelling tapestry of royal blood. No one remembers the pain in your hips, the way your skin tore after your 8th childbirth, the sound of cannon fire in the distance as you soothed your 3rd daughter through a fever. No one recalls the quiet rage you swallowed when your husband dismissed your thoughts on state matters, or the tremble in your hands when you signed the wedding contract of your youngest child, yet another cousin to another fading crown. But your blood survives. It trickles down, not always nobly but stubbornly, into queens, duchesses, forgotten daughters, into the veins of people who will never know your name, but still carry the echo of your jawline. You were not glorious, not famous, not feared, but you endured. And in your world, that was the closest thing to winning. So here you are, tangled in centuries of velvet, bone and legacy. You've walked through gilded palaces and dark, airless chapels. You've met queens who ruled, suffered, and were quietly erased, their lives pressed flat beneath gold crests and black veils. Each of them born to be everything, holy, fertile, silent, and strong. Each one sacrificed on the altar of a name spelled the same way, again and again, until the family tree stopped branching and simply bent in on itself. You've felt the chill of Spanish stone floors under silk slippers, heard the soft clink of rosary beads between fingers sore from childbirth, watched young girls with barely formed hips hoisted onto thrones like lambs dressed for slaughter. You've seen portraits painted with lies and graves filled with truths no one wanted to write down. The thing is, these women weren't weak, they weren't ornaments, they were endurance machines, political chess pieces with iron cores. And while the men who ruled around them died in battles or syphilitic haze or gouty comfort, these women ruled in silence, from beds, cradles, confessionals, from behind fans and under corsets that cut into their ribs, with bloodlines that betrayed them, with uteruses turned war zones. But now the candles are low, the history books are closed, the ghosts of queens with too many names and too few choices are quiet again, tucked back into their marble tombs. You made it through. And you probably wouldn't have survived this if we're being honest. Most people didn't, but that's the point. So exhale. Let the velvet fall away, let the crowns vanish, let your jaw relax. Seriously, don't make it a Habsburg thing. Yeah, the night is still, the story's over. Sleep tight, Your Majesty.